The cleaver hung mid-swing, frozen in the lamplight like a guillotine blade caught in judgment. Blood pooled on the worn oak slab, thicker than the usual slaughter runoff, congealing into patterns that caught Elias Thorne's eye, swirls that almost formed letters. Or was that the fog playing tricks on a man who'd stared too long into London's underbelly? Inspector Thorne pushed back his fedora, the brim casting a deeper shadow over his scarred palm as he twitched it open and closed against the damp chill seeping through Spitalfields Market's canvas awnings. He'd arrived just after dawn, on October 17th, 1892, the pea soup fog clinging to his wool overcoat like a beggar's plea. The market throbbed already, hawkers' cries slicing the air, Yiddish barters for overripe pears mingling with the wet thunk of hooves on cobbles, and beneath it all, that metallic tang of fresh offal sharpened by coal smog. Thorne's boots squelched in the gutters, where yesterday's slaughter waste mixed with rainwater, sending up a stench that burned the nostrils. 22 butcher stalls lined this row, their hooks swaying empty now, but whispers from Dorset Street doss houses had pulled him here, wares that no honest blade should yield. Gideon Blackthorn loomed behind the nearest slab, his hulking frame blocking the gas flame's flicker. 55 years had carved him into a mountain of muscle and regret, one glass eye clicking softly as he blinked, the other milky with unspoken debts. He wiped his massive hands on a blood-stiffened apron, leaving smears like war paint. "Inspector Thorne, is it? Market's clean as a parson's collar. What's the peelers want at this hour?" Thorne leaned in, tracing the scar on his palm with a thumbnail, the old ripper gash throbbing in the cold. Biblical echoes flickered in his mind, as the lamb to slaughter, but he kept his voice a clipped drawl, Cockney edges honed by Whitechapel nights. "Clean, eh? That's what they all say till the guts spill secrets. Words out your lot's flogging more than mutton. Human cuts, maybe? Burking trade revived?" He jabbed a finger at the slab's odd swirls. "This ain't pig's blood, smells wrong, too sweet, like fear sweat mixed in." Gideon's good eye narrowed, the glass one staring blankly past Thorne's shoulder into the fog. He shifted his weight, boots grinding grit underfoot, and let out a rumble like distant thunder over the Thames. Rumours from flower girls and their penny dreadfuls. We shift beef, pork, the odd goat from the docks. Nothing fancy. "You chasing ghosts again, like that ripper bollocks?" But his fingers drummed the cleaver's handle, a rhythm too practiced, too evasive. Thorne's gaze swept the stall, hooks dangling with sinewy scraps wrapped in grease paper, a ledger half hidden under a rag, pages yellowed and dog-eared. The air hummed with the market's pulse. Nearby, Liora Voss hawked wilted violets from her barrow, her sharp eyes flicking their way, ink-stained fingers twisting stems as if strangling secrets. 32. She was with raven hair pinned under a shawl, and a gaze that pierced fog like a stiletto. Thorne caught her stare, nodded once. Informants like her thrived on scraps of truth, peddling whispers to pay tenement rents. "Not ghosts, Gideon. Facts. Tommy Wilkins vanished 3 nights back. Lad of 19 worked your row. His ma swears he was flush with coins sudden-like, then poof. And these swirls." Thorne scraped a nail through the blood, lifting it to the light. It gleamed unnaturally, flecked with something granular. Bone dust? "Looks like hasty wiping. What did you carve here before the dawn patrol?" Gideon snorted, but sweat beaded his brow despite the autumn bite. He reached for a hunk of wrapped meat, hefting it with deceptive ease. "Tommy? Wild boy, owed half the porters. Probably legged it to the docks or a Bethnal Green crib. As for the slab, spillage happens. Clean it wrong, leaves marks." He unwrapped the meat slightly, steam rising in the chill, revealing marbled flesh that didn't quite match beef, tendons too fine, fat too pale. Thorne's stomach turned, not from nausea, but the puzzle's first jagged edge. Across the alley the market's clamour swelled, costermongers rattling barrows laden with bruised apples, their calls in thick Yiddish accents, "Zufe glatte peren," fresh like Mama's kiss. Drowning a distant coster's barrel organ wheezing, "God save the Queen." Thorne ignored it, stepping closer to Gideon, voice dropping to a gravel whisper. 22 stalls, all buzzing the same whisper. Silas Grimshaw leads the pack, they say. Enigmatic sod with a face like carved oak. Where's he at? "Silas don't show till noon." Gideon muttered, rewrapping the meat with hands that trembled just a fraction. "Runs the back sheds off Dorset Street. Private stock." His glass eye clicked again, louder in the pause, as if ticking down to confession. Thorne filed it away, turning as Liora Voss sidled up. Her barrow's wheels creaking over cobbles slick with runoff. Violet's faint perfume cut the blood reek, but her eyes held no innocence, devout cross at her throat glinting against a gambler's fire. "Inspector," she said, voice soft as petals but edged like thorns, Yiddish lilt curling the words. "Gideon straight as these stems, but the fog hides things. Last night, shadows in Grimshaw's lane. Chance low like prayers gone wrong. And Tommy, he boasted of special cuts paying debts." Gideon's face darkened, jowls quivering. "Mind your barrow, girl. Pamphleteer busybody." He lumbered forward a step, but Thorne blocked him with an upraised palm, scar twitching visibly now. "Hold it. Chance? Flesh from shadows? Awakening old pacts?" Thorne echoed the rumor, watching Leora's flinch. Gideon's scowl deepen. His own mind raced, burking gangs of old body snatchers peddling cadavers for anatomists, but this felt fresher, organized. Poverty's cruel hand drove men to devil's bargains, yet reason demanded proof. He polished the locket under his shirt with scarred fingers, glimpsing his daughter's faded miniature. 8 years estranged, her face a ghost sharper than any ripper shade. Liora leaned in, breath warm against the fog. "Not devils, Inspector. Village law from the old country. Blood oaths to wraiths in the slaughter gloom. Silas preaches it after dark. In the Doss house Mira Quill runs." But Tommy laughed it off, till he didn't come home. Mira Quill. Thorne knew the name. 27, widow of a reformer knifed in a Dorset Street brawl. Her Doss house a warren of immigrant despair. Motive layered on motive. He pressed Liora. "You see Tommy there? Flesh that ain't beast?" She hesitated, fingers crushing a violet stem, juice staining like blood. Whispers only, but the meat. It moves, some say. Twitches on the slab. Gideon barked a laugh, too forced. "Superstition. East End fever." But he backed toward his stall's shadows. Cleaver gripped tighter. Thorne let them stew, striding deeper into the market's maze. Stalls blurred in the fog, hooks swaying with haunches that hung limp, too uniform. Hawkers averting eyes, their cleavers notched oddly deep. The air grew heavier, coal smoke weaving with a sweeter rot. Jasmine? No, decay masked by spice. His palm itched fiercely now. Shadows at vision's edge, murmuring nursery rhymes from boyhood haunts. Sanity's thread frayed, but he pushed on, toward Silas Grimshaw's rumoured shed. At the row's end, a side alley yawned, Dorset Street squalor bleeding in. Gas lamps guttered, casting Venetian shadows on brick walls slick with damp. A door hung ajar in Grimshaw's shed, crimson light spilling out. Not lamp, but fresh slaughter glow. Thorne drew his truncheon, heart steady despite the twitch. Inside, the stench hit like a fist. Blood, yes, but mingled with candle wax and herbs, ritual cover for something profane. He stepped over the threshold, fog curling at his heels. The slab dominated, empty save for sawdust clumped dark. Walls bore hooks with scraps dangling, pale and veined wrong. A pamphlet fluttered from a nail. Mira Quill's mark, Reformer's ink decrying market hypocrisies. And there, etched faint in the sawdust, a symbol. Interlocking cleavers, forming a pact's sigil. Footsteps crunched behind. Thorne whirled, truncheon raised. Silas Grimshaw himself filled the doorway, 60th a day, face etched like weathered oak, eyes black as the Thames at midnight. "Inspector, come for the truth or the lie they sell." Before Thorne could answer, a scream pierced from the market proper, Leora's barrow overturning, violets scattering like spilled blood. Gideon bolted past, glass eye flashing, vanishing into fog. And in Grimshaw's hand, half concealed by his apron, a ledger matching the stall's hidden one. What had the flower girl seen? Thorne lunged after Gideon, but Grimshaw's voice halted him, low and binding. "Touch that ledger and the East End's night devours you whole." This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, And he thanks you for it." Thorne's scar burned as the scream echoed unanswered. The ledger's pages whispering promises of flesh no man should trade. Thorne's boots splashed through the sawdust-clumped alley, the scream's echo pulling him like a hook in his gut. Grimshaw's words hung in the air behind him. "The East End's night devours you whole." But the flower girl's cry cut sharper, raw with terror, that no market brawl could muster. He shoved past dangling hooks, their pale scraps swaying like hanged men in the draught, and burst into the market's throbbing heart. Carts rattled, hawkers barked prices for bruised apples and wilting kale, but heads turned now toward the overturned barrow, violets crushed underfoot into a purple smear that looked too much like bruising on skin. Liora Voss knelt amid the wreckage, her ink-stained fingers clawing at scattered blooms as if gathering secrets from the petals. 32 years had etched fine lines around her sharp eyes, eyes that darted like cornered rats, her shawl slipping from shoulders pale against the night's cold smog. She rocked slightly, breath hitching, while a cluster of costermongers gawked from afar, their pipes forgotten mid-puff. Thorne dropped to one knee beside her, his scarred palm twitching against the cold cobbles, the old knife gash flaring as if the Ripper himself prodded it awake. "Miss Voss," he said, voice low, cockney edges honed like a blade. "That scream weren't for spilled flowers. What'd you see?" His free hand steadied her elbow, feeling the tremor run through her like a live wire under wool. She lifted her gaze, lashes wet, but no tears fell. Flower girls in Spitalfields learned early to hoard their salt. Inspector Thorne. It was Gideon, hulking past like the devil's own dray horse, glass eye catching the gaslight, wild. But behind him, in the fog off his barrow, shapes. Not crates, not sides of beef. Bundles wriggling faint, wrapped in sacking that dripped dark. Hand one unwound just enough, God forgive me. A hand pale as moonlight, fingers curled like it clawed for air. Thorne's jaw tightened, the market's reek of congealing offal thickening in his throat. Wriggles in sacks. Burking gangs had tried that trade decades back. Fresh cadavers for anatomists. But this smacked fresher, fouler. He scanned the crowd. Gideon's broad back had vanished into the Dorset Street fringe, where doss houses leaned like drunks and gas lamps, fought losing battles against the fog. "Stay put," he told Liora, helping her to her feet, her grip lingering a beat too long on his sleeve, as if anchoring herself to something solid amid the unraveling. "I'll fetch that porter back, get answers straight." She nodded, but her eyes flicked to the alley where Grimshaw's shed lurked. "Mind the butchers, Inspector. Silas Grimshaw's lot, 22 stalls strong. They peddle more than mutton these nights. Pamphlets say rituals, old village ways to cheat the workhouse. I print 'em myself, Miraquill's words, but even I wonder if it's just ink or blood binding the pact." Thorne filed that away, the reformer's widow entering the weave like a loose thread. Miraquill ran a doss house on Dorset Street, her husband's death last spring whispered as suicide but smelling of market debts. He patted Leora's hand once, rough callous against her ink smudges, and plunged into the fog-choked lanes. The market's clamour faded to muffled roars, replaced by the slosh of run-off gutters and distant barrel organ wheezes, tunes warped by damp. His locket swung heavy against his chest, daughter Eliza's miniature portrait inside, a reconciliation dream buried under case files and regrets, but no time for polishing it now. Dorset Street hit him full force, the worst rookery in the East End. Walls weeping condensation that tasted of despair on his tongue. Thorne's truncheon tapped his thigh rhythmically, a ward against pickpockets melting from doorways. Gideon's barrow squatted halfway down, abandoned under a flickering lamp, sacking bundles piled haphazard. But one split open, stained dark at the seams. He approached cautious, nostrils flaring at the metallic tang sharper than beef blood, mingled with sweat and fear-soured cloth. No wriggles now, just stillness that pressed heavier. A low groan came from behind the cart. Thorne circled, truncheon out. Gideon Blackthorn sprawled against a soot-black wall, massive frame crumpled, his glass eye staring blank at the stars lost in smog. 55 years of porting had bulked him like an ox, but now his good eye fluttered, blood trickling from a split lip, knuckles raw as if he'd punched shadows. The porter's massive paws clutched a stray tabby cat, purring oblivious against his chest, a scrap of mackerel dangling from its jaws. "Blackthorn," Thorne growled, crouching low. "Running from a flower girl's barrow like you seen the Ripper reborn. Those sacks, Liora spied a hand poking through. Talk plain or I'll haul you to the station myself, glass eye and all." Gideon coughed, a wet rumble, and shifted the cat gently to his lap, stroking its mangy fur with fingers thick as sausages. His voice came gravelly, laced with a docker's burr, words tumbling slow like he weighed each against loyalty's scales. "Inspector, weren't running from her. From them what followed. Grimshaw's boys, 2 of 'em, loading the barrow odd tonight, told me to shift it quiet, no questions, for the good of the market codes. Old codes from when this was fruit stalls in '82, packs to keep outsiders off our patch. But I peeked, sacks heavy, breathing faint, not pigs nor lambs. Human weight, Inspector, trussed and gagged. Promised coin to look away, but the cat here, she scratched at one, and the hand flopped out, cold but twitching." Thorne's palm itched fiercer, tracing the scar unconsciously, biblical echoes murmuring, "Lamb to slaughter indeed." Human cargo. White slavery rings snaked through the East End. Girls and lads shipped to continental brothels or worse, but 22 butchers coordinating. That ledger in Grimshaw's grip flashed in memory, pages fat with tallies no butcher's books should hold. "Names, Gideon. Which boys? And where'd they take the rest?" The porter winced, glass eye clicking as he blinked deliberate. "Young ones, Timms and Hale, stalls 12 and 15. Said the bundles came from Mira Quill's doss house, debtors paying off in flesh. But Grimshaw, he oversees, mutters of awakening the market spirit, old law to make the trade boom. Madness or cover. I swung at 'em when they grabbed for the cat. Got this." He gestured his battered face, then fed the tabby another mackerel flake, tenderness cracking his brute shell. "Can't let it stand. But the codes bind tight. Families fed by this market." Thorne stood, fog coiling around his ankles like plotting serpents. Mira Quill again, her pamphlets fueling rumours, her doss house a funnel for the vanished. He clapped Gideon's shoulder, feeling the tremor beneath. "Park that barrow at the station by dawn, testify clean, and maybe the codes bend for once." The porter nodded, cat purring approval, but doubt shadowed his good eye, loyalty's pull warring with glimpsed horror. Backtracking through Dorset Street's warrens, Thorne's mind pieced the scatter. Grimshaw's shed with its sigil-scratched sawdust, Liora's wriggling sacks, Gideon's human weight confession. Not rituals, no, cold commerce, flesh peddled as meat or labour, butchers turning desperation to profit under ancient market guise. The air grew thicker, coal dust settling on his tongue, as he neared Quill's doss house, a sagging 3-story on the street's bend, windows barred like teeth in a grin. The door creaked under his knock, Mira Quill herself answering, 27 and sharp as a stiletto, raven hair pinned loose, widow's weeds hugging a figure that drew eyes despite the gloom. Her face paled at his badge, but she recovered smooth, gesturing him into a parlour, thick with pipe smoke and stewed tea scent. "Inspector Thorne, word travels fast as cholera here. Come for my husband's pamphlets or the rumours they stir." He eased into a horsehair chair that pricked through his trousers, scanning shelves crammed with radical tracts, her printing, Liora's ink. "Rumours of sacks breathing, Mrs. Quill. Your doss house feeding Grimshaw's stalls, debtors vanishing into butchers' barrows." She poured tea with steady hands, steam curling like ghosts, but her knuckles whitened on the saucer. Husband exposed the market's rot before he swung from those rafters. Suicide, they ruled. But debts from Grimshaw's loans strangled him first. I shelter the desperate print truth to burn the lies. No flesh trade here, Inspector. But last night, 2 lads bolted without paying, muttering of pacts. Check the ledgers if you doubt. Thorne sipped the tea, bitter as regret, eyes on her unblinking stare. Truth or deflection? She slid a ledger across, thinner than Grimshaw's. Entries mundane. Rent, bread, gin. But a loose page fluttered free, Mira snatching it quick, cheeks flushing. Private notes. He leaned forward, palm twitching. Hide nothing, or you're in the web too. Before she answered, a thud rattled the ceiling, footfalls heavy then a muffled curse. Mira froze, tea spilling hot across the tablecloth. Thorne rose, truncheon palmed, as the parlour door banged wide. Silas Grimshaw loomed, apron still blood-flecked, two burly butchers flanking, Timms and Hale, faces pocked and sullen. "Inspector," Grimshaw rumbled, oak-etched features twisting sly. "Fancy meeting here. Quill's webs tangle wide, but touch her ledgers and you'll find the real trade, the one that feeds us all." Thorne's scar seared, the room shrinking under their stares, the thud from above echoing like a heartbeat trapped in the walls. What cargo hid upstairs, and whose hand had clawed free from the sacks? Silas Grimshaw filled the doorway like a slab of butcher's beef, his bloodied apron crusted at the edges, releasing a faint tang of iron and brine that cut through the parlour's stewed tea haze. Flanking him, Timms shifted his weight from boot to boot, pockmarks on his cheeks gleaming under the gaslight like craters in a diseased moon, while Hale's thick fingers flexed at his sides, knuckles scarred from more than cleaving mutton. Thorne kept his truncheon low but ready, the wood warm against his palm scar that burned now like fresh acid. "Grimshaw," Thorne said, voice steady as a sexton's bell, bursting in uninvited. "That's a bold cut for a man with questions hanging over his stalls like flies." Grimshaw's lips curled, not quite a smile, his oak-etched face folding into creases deep as market gutters. He stepped forward, boots scraping the threadbare rug, and the room seemed to contract, air thickening with the press of bodies. "Questions?" From a ripper-chaser sniffing old shadows. "Mira here's the weaver of tales, printing poison that drives good men to rope. Those lads upstairs? Debtors skipping her ledger. Nothing for your badge." Mira Quill stood rigid behind her table, spilled tea soaking the cloth in dark blooms, her knuckles bone-white on the chair back. She shot Grimshaw a glance sharp as a filleting knife, then met Thorne's eyes. "They're boarders, Inspector. Rough trade from the docks, paying in sweat. Grimshaw lends coin at usury rates. My husband's noose proves it." A low rumble echoed from the ceiling again, closer this time, like something heavy dragging across floorboards. Thorne's gaze flicked upward, the plaster stained yellow from pipe fug and damp. "Upstairs then, all of us. Or do shadows scare the market king?" Grimshaw chuckled, a wet rasp from his barrel chest, and jerked his head to Timms. The pockmarked man lumbered past, Hale following, their shoulders brushing the doorframe. Thorne fell in behind Mira, her skirts whispering as they climbed the narrow stairs, wood creaking under the weight. The air grew mustier, laced with unwashed wool and something sharper. Fear sweat, or the faint rot of forgotten laundry piled in corners. The landing opened to a dim corridor, gas mantles flickering low, casting long fingers of shadow that danced like pickpockets. Another thud, definite now from the end room, and Thorne pushed ahead, truncheon raised. The door stuck at first, swollen from damp, then gave with a groan. Inside, two figures hunched over a sagging bed, scrawny lads, no more than 20, clothes ragged as Spitalfields rags, one cradling a bandaged hand while the other pawed at a burlap sack wedged half under the mattress. They froze at the intrusion, eyes wide in lantern jaws, the bandaged one's fingers twitching bloody through gauze. "Oi, what's this?" the other spat, voice thick with whopping dockyard slur, scrambling to his feet. Thorne swept the room with his eyes, peeling wallpaper blooming mould, a ewer of brackish water on the washstand, straw pallets reeking of mildew. The sack bulged oddly, a damp patch spreading at one end. "Open it. Slow." Grimshaw shoved forward, snatching the burlap before Mira could protest. He upended it onto the bed, and out tumbled a heap of pale roots, parsnips, knobbly and bruised, mingled with sodden carrots that rolled to the floor with wet thuds. No breathing cargo, just vegetable rot masquerading as mystery. The lads exchanged glances, the bandaged one mumbling, "Just spuds from the barrow, Gov. No harm." Thorne knelt, prodding the pile, the earthy chill seeping through his trousers. Buried among the roots lay a crumpled pamphlet, ink-smeared, Mira's hand, decrying flesh merchants and blood debts unpaid. He held it up, letting the gaslight catch the bold type. "This your notion of truth, Mrs. Quill? Stirring lads to bolt with market pilferings?" Mira's face tightened, but she crossed her arms, chin lifting. "Truth pays no rent. My husband printed the same till Grimshaw's loans choked him. These boys work his stalls by day, dodge his collectors by night. Ask them. The bandaged lad licked dry lips, eyes darting to Grimshaw's bulk. Boss man lends fair, but the interest, it bites deep. We nicked veg to trade, nothing more. Swear on me, mum. Grimshaw's glass. No, wait, that was another. His real eye narrowed, the other shadowed under heavy brow. Lies from Quill's poison press. Inspector. These curs feed the rivalry. Her doss house harbours cheats, printing slander that empties my tills. Thorne straightened, pocketing the pamphlet, his palm throbbing as if the ripper's blade traced it anew. The room felt too close, breaths mingling in the stale air, and he caught Mira's fleeting glance toward a loose floorboard by the bed. Quick, then gone. Something hid there, or nothing, but the twitch in her jaw betrayed it. Biblical echoes stirred in his mind. The lamb led blind or the wolf in shepherd's wool. Out, he ordered, voice cutting the standoff. All but Quill. We'll speak private. The butchers grumbled, but filed down. Grimshaw lingering last, his breath hot on Thorne's neck. Market's veins run deep, Inspector. Cut too careless, and you bleed the whole beast dry. His boots scraped deliberate on the threshold, then silence as they descended. Mira exhaled, sinking to the bed edge amid the spilled roots, her hands folding in her lap like prayer. Up close, fine lines etched her eyes, widow's grief carved soft around the reformer's fire. They're scared of him, those lads. Silas rules Spitalfields like a petty king, loans at 20%. Broken bones for late pay. My husband borrowed to print his tracts, exposed the immigrant graft, the rotten cause under pretty pears, found him swinging dawn after, tongue lolling like a gutted fish. Suicide, the coroner yawned. Thorne paced the cramped space, boots crunching a stray parsnip. He polished his locket absently, the metal warm from his pocket, daughter's miniature face a ghost inside. Pamphlets mention sax breathing, flesh beyond beef, your words or theirs. She hesitated, fingers twisting her apron hem. Whispers from flower stalls, Liora Voss peddles posies nearby, ears everywhere. She claims Grimshaw's 22 butchers sauce queer cuts. Too tender, no bone chips. Burking echoes, she says, like Burke and Hare stuffing anatomy schools, but proof? None but shadows. Liora Voss. The name tugged a thread. Ink-fingered girl glimpsed at market fringe yesterday, hawking wilted blooms with eyes too sharp for petals. Thorne filed it, stepping to the loose floorboard. It lifted easy, revealing a hollow. More pamphlets, bundled tight, plus a small tin, opium residue blackening the edges, and a silver locket chain snapped clean. Mira lunged, but too late. Private, sent from my sister, calms the nights. He snapped the tin shut, chain glinting. Opium dreams fueling radical fire, or silencing tongues. But the locket chain matched his own in weight workmanship, pawnshop silver East End mark. Personal now, a snag in his own unravelling. Downstairs voices rose, Grimshaw barking at the lads. Then a new timbre cut through, gravelly porter's growl. Thorne pocketed the find and descended, Mira trailing. In the parlour, a new man hulked by the hearth. Gideon Blackthorn, 55 if a day, hulking frame dwarfing the chair. His glass eye clicking faint as he blinked, fixed on the spilled tea. Porter for Grimshaw's rivals, or so market tongues wag, loyal to old codes, yet fists like hams that crushed more than crates. Inspector Thorne, Gideon rumbled, voice a Dorset burr softened by years in the smoke, rising to offer a massive pour. Heard the fuss from the street. Grimshaw's lot stirring mud again? Grimshaw snorted, wiping apron blood on his thigh. Blackthorn scavenging scraps. This copper's chasing ghosts, sacks of air and Quill's fevered scribbles. Thorne eyed the glass eye's unblinking stare, Gideon's free hand feeding a scrap to a mangy tabby curled by his boot, tenderness in a brute's grip. You porter the market, Blackthorn. See the loads in, out, breathing sacks or just bold lies? Gideon scratched the cat's ear, its purr rumbling low. Loads come dawn. Fog thick as porridge. Grimshaw's 22 haul from Smithfield official-like. But nights, shadows shift. Liora Voss peddles tales of wicker creaks from their yard, things alive under canvas. Me? I see debts paid in quiet ways. Cats don't lie. The tabby arched, claws flexing, and Thorne felt the vice tighten. Voss again, linking flower girl to widow to porters to king butcher. Mira poured fresh tea, hands steadier now, but her eyes flicked to the stairs. Grimshaw's men loitered outside the window, silhouettes patient as wolves. As Thorne drained his cup, bitter grounds coating his tongue, a costermonger's cry pierced the street din. Yiddish bark for overripe pears, followed by hurried steps crunching gravel. The door rattled, and in burst Liora Voss herself, cheeks flushed under a shawl sodden with drizzle, ink-stained fingers clutching a wilted posy bouquet. Her sharp eyes swept the room, landing on Thorne with gambler's thrill masked as piety. "Inspector, word you're peeling the onion. But beware, the cause poisoned. Grimshaw's pacts run deeper than loans." Grimshaw's face darkened to liver hue, Tim's cracking knuckles behind him. Thorne's scar flamed, the parlour electric with crossed stairs. What pact bound flower girl to whispers of flesh unbound, and whose locket chain lay snapped in the widow's hoard? Bait for his daughter's ghost, or the killer's lure? Comment, who you suspect. Can you solve it first? Liora Voss slammed the door behind her, the posy bouquet shedding petals like confetti from a grave across Mira Quill's threadbare rug. Rain drizzled from her shawl, pooling at her boots, and the parlour air thickened with the scent of wet wool, mingling the stale tea's tannin bite. Thorne's palm scar itched fiercer, fingers curling instinctively as eyes locked. Grimshaw's glare venomous, Tim's shifting bulk like a bull pawing earth. Gideon Blackthorn pausing mid-scratch on the tabby's flank. "Poisoned core, Miss Voss." Thorne leaned forward, voice a gravel rasp honed by Whitechapel nights. "Speak plain, or it's all wind in the willows." Liora shook droplets from her dark curls, sharp eyes darting from Grimshaw to the inspector. A flicker of that gambler's spark betraying her pious tilt of chin. She thrust the wilted flowers toward Mira, who accepted them with trembling fingers, stems brushing the widow's lace cuff. "For the house, Mira, love, to ward off ill airs." Then to Thorne, lower, fervent. "Silas here don't just carve Smithfield hares." His 22 whisper of barrows unloaded at witching hour, sacks twitching heavier than any ox. Pamphlets say it's Burker's trade revived, flesh for the quicklime pits, sold quiet to the desperate. Grimshaw lunged half a step, cleaver calloused fist-balling, but Gideon's massive paw clamped his shoulder, glass eye clicking in warning. "Easy, King Butcher. Copper's got ears, not horns." The tabby hissed, fur bristling, and scampered under the table, nails skittering floorboards. Timms grunted, knuckles popping anew, his breath fogging the pane where market gaslight bled orange through grimy glass. Thorne rose slow, chair legs groaning protest, positioning between the flower girl and the butchers. The room pulsed with restrained fury, coal scuttle ticking as embers cooled, distant cleaver thunks from Spitalfields alleys sinking like a heartbeat. Mira clutched the posy to her chest, thorns pricking through fabric unnoticed, her widow's veil askew, revealing a bruise blooming faint on her collarbone. "Liora, not here," she murmured, voice frayed as Dorset Street ropes. "They know my husband's words now." "Know 'em and burn 'em," Grimshaw spat, shrugging off Gideon's grip, spittle flecking his blood-stiffened beard. Quill scribbled lies to rile the reformers, talk of pacts and shadows to sell his rags. Voss peddles the same rot with her posies. "Inspector, these women spin webs for pity coin. My lads haul honest meat, dawn to dusk, debts or no." Thorne traced his scar deliberate, the old knife gash from a ripper shadow flaring white-hot in the damp. "Honesty in Spitalfields?" A laugh lodged in his throat, dry as bone dust. He recalled the locket chain in Mira's drawer upstairs, silver links snapped clean, initials E.T. etched faint, mirroring the one he polished nightly under his gas jet. Daughter's ghost or planted snare. "Debts, you say? Blackthorn mentioned quiet payments. Voss ties it to your yards. Walk me there, Grimshaw. Show sacks that don't breathe." The butcher's laugh barked harsh, echoing off peeling wallpaper. "Yards at midnight? Fog's your friend then, copper, but Tims'll guide, ain't hiding." He jerked thumb at his enforcer, who nodded sullen, meaty face impassive as swit. Gideon scooped the tabby gentle, murmuring Yiddish scraps to soothe it, his free hand flexing veins thick as ropes. Liora sidled closer to Thorne, ink fingers brushing his sleeve, accidental-like. "Take my lantern, Inspector." "Grimshaw's creaks hide more than rats," Mira interjected soft, pouring water into a basin with deliberate splashes, steam rising lavender-scented from her hidden vial. "Silas, go. Let truth carve itself." Her eyes met Thorne's, holding plea unspoken. Avenge her man or unravel her own tangles. They spilled into Dorset Street's moor, fog coiling ankles like spectral hounds, gas lamps sputtering haloed orbs through the pea-soup veil. Timms led stolid, boots splashing runoff thick with market offal, Grimshaw trailing with muttered curses. Liora matched Thorne's stride, shawl clutched tight, her breath visible puffs carrying pear sweet from her stall. Gideon hung back, feeding alley strays from his pocket crusts, glass eye glinting farewell. Spitalfields Market loomed, a cavern of timber arches and iron struts since 1682's fruit peddlers, now bloated with immigrant clamour muted by night. Cleaver echoes faded to drips from slaughter eaves, air heavy with congealed blood and coal smog that painted lungs black. Thorne's coat hem dragged slick cobbles, each step sucking mud, the vice in his chest squeezing tighter. What drove these men? Poverty's grind or something fouler, echoing burking dens of old. Timms halted at Grimshaw's yard gate, rusted iron groaning inward on hinges weeping oil. Lantern light, Liora's gift, flame dancing erratic, revealed stacked crates stamped Smithfield Honest, canvas tarps lashed taut over halls. But one corner sagged peculiar. Bulge-pressing fabric from within, dew glistened. Thorne knelt, palm steadying on wet stone, nostrils flaring to copper tang sharper than yesterday's kill. "Open it," he ordered, voice cutting fog. Timms hesitated, glanced to Grimshaw, who nodded curt. Canvas ripped free with a wet schlop revealing, not twitching sack but bloated sow carcass, entrails spilled neat for gutting, maggots already writhing pearly in folds. No human horror, just butcher's leavings, stinking of rot and denial. Grimshaw crossed arms triumphant. "See? Meat and muck. Voss's whispers rot faster than this." Liora paled, posy forgotten in her fist, petals crumbling to sludge. But Thorne's gaze snagged lower. Trampled earth beneath the sow-bore boot prints mismatched, finer tread than Tim's hobnails. Laced with ink smears fresh. Flower girl's ink? Or another's flight? A low rumble built from the market depths, cartwheels protesting over cobbles, hawker's Yiddish growl piercing fog. Thorne straightened, scar pulsing warning. Red herring or blind alley? Then, from the shadows beyond the yard, a figure detached, slight, hooded, clutching bundled rags that reeked of quicklime and fear. Foyt bolted at their stairs, vanishing into alley warrens. Thorne gave chase, boots pounding slick stone, fog parting reluctant as Grimshaw bellowed behind. "Stop that rat!" Timms lumbered pursuit, but the figure darted nimble, rags trailing whisper. Liora called urgent, "Inspector, the pamphlet drop." He cornered it in a dead-end mews, back to brick wall slick with moss. Hood falling to reveal not man but boy, no more than 14. Face smudged coal-black, eyes wide as saucers. Rags parted to show sheaf of damp pamphlets, Mira Quill's script bold. The flesh-packed of Spitalfields, 22 butchers feed the void. The boy trembled. Rags clutched like shield. "Ain't mine to sell. Found 'em in the doss house dust. Swear on me, Mum." Thorne snatched one, ink running but words searing. Accusations of ritual trade, flesh not beasts, oaths sworn in blood to lift debts. Quill's hand or forgery? The boy bolted past as Timms arrived panting, but Thorne let him flee. Answers first, chains later. Back at the yard, Grimshaw smirked, Quill's ghost scribbling still. But Liora's face twisted guilt-shadowed, fingers twisting shawl fringe. Thorne pocketed the pamphlet, fog closing ranks anew. Eliminated Grimshaw's sacks as proof, but the bootprints lingered, ink accusing. And that locket, whose hand snapped it? Dawn crept grudging, gas lamps hissing farewell, when a constable's whistle shrilled from Mira's doss house direction. Thorne's gut knotted as shouts rose. Another body, or the widow silenced? He broke into run, palm scar burning like Judgment Day, the market's pulse quickening to devour its secrets whole. Word from the beat copper hit like frost. Liora Quill found slumped in her parlour, posy thorns embedded deep in her palm, pamphlet clutched as death grip. Poison tea, they guessed, lips blue-flecked. Thorne shoved through the gathering crowd, heart slamming ribs, only to find her eyes fluttering open, alive barely, retching lavender bile into basin. "The chain! Your daughter's!" she gasped, fingers pointing limp to the drawer. "Grimshaw's man took it, to lure you blind." But as Thorne whirled, Tim's bulk filled the doorway. Enforcer's face split in oily grin, cleaver glinting fresh from the yard. "Time to carve truth, Inspector." The parlour door slammed shut, lock clicking final, and Thorne realized too late. The vice had sprung, jaws gnashing flesh and lies alike. Tims's cleaver caught the gaslight's feeble glow, edge honed to a whisper-thin gleam that promised no mercy. Thorne backed against the parlour's scarred oak sideboard, splintered from years of desperate fists and forgotten brawls, his scarred palm flexing involuntarily around the Webley revolver, half drawn from his coat. Liora Quill coughed wetly behind him, her frail form slumping deeper into the threadbare armchair, lavender-tainted spittle flecking her chin as she clutched the basin like a talisman. The air thickened with the reek of her poisoned tea, bitter almonds undercut by the doss house's perpetual mould and coal dust, and Tims's advance filled the cramped space, his bulk heaving with each deliberate step, glass eye fixed unblinking on Thorne's throat. "You poke in where cleavers don't swing, Inspector," Tims growled, voice a gravelly rumble laced with the dock's brute cadence. No poetry in it, just the blunt force of a man who'd hefted carcasses since boyhood. He feinted left, cleaver arcing high, but Thorne dodged right, shoulder slamming into a wobbly table that tipped with a clatter of chipped crockery. China shattered underfoot, shards grinding into the worn rug as Thorne lunged, revolver barking once, crack splitting the air like judgment. The bullet grazed Tims's shoulder, tearing wool and drawing a bloom of red that soaked his shirt front. But the enforcer barely flinched, swinging wild with a bellow that rattled the flimsy walls. Liora gasped, scrambling backward, her posy-thorned palm leaving bloody smears on the armrest. Thorne tasted copper on his tongue, adrenaline sharpening every sense, the sizzle of the single gas mantle overhead, the distant clamour of Dorset Street's night trade filtering through the locked door like muffled accusations, hawkers' cries twisting into something feral. He pivoted, using the sideboard's edge to vault over, but Tims's free hand clamped his ankle, yanking him down amid the wreckage. They grappled, Thorne's knee driving into the man's gut, eliciting a whoosh of foul breath, garlic and stale porter, before Tims's fist connected with Thorne's jaw, stars exploding behind his eyes. Pain bloomed hot across his face, but Thorne twisted free, palm scar throbbing as if the Ripper's blade revisited old wounds. He scrambled up, revolver lost in the melee, and seized a brass poker from the cold hearth, its weight familiar as sin. Tims rose bellowing, cleaver raised for the killing stroke, but Thorne thrust low, poker sinking into the enforcer's thigh with a meaty thunk. Tims howled, staggering back against the door, cleaver clanging to the floorboards. Thorne pounced, knee on the man's chest, poker poised at his good eye. "Who sent the dog to bite, Tims? Grimshaw's leash too short." Tims spat blood-flecked phlegm, chest heaving under Thorne's weight, his glass eye clicking faintly as he blinked through agony. "Ain't no leash, copper. Market feeds its own. Quill's pamphlets. Poison words stirring the pot. But you chase ghosts." He chuckled wetly, a dark rasp that held no mirth, fingers twitching toward the fallen cleaver. Liora stirred then, voice a ragged thread. "His boot matches the prints at my print shop. He burned the rest, but not before I copied one. The pact, it's no myth. 22 butchers, debts to shadows older than the market." Thorne pressed the poker harder, drawing a fresh whimper, but his mind raced. Liora's words a half-light in the fog. Tims's boot, scuffed and heavy, bore the same iron hobnails as those yard prints, ruling him enforcer for the pamphlet's torching, yet the cleaver's arrival here screamed deeper design. "The locket, Tims. Grimshaw's man took it to lure me. Your doing." Tims's lips curled, defiance cracking. "Found it on the boy, the ragamuffin runner. Liora Voss paid him to plant it, draw you to the widow. Flower girls' thorns run deep, eh? Debts to the syndicate, not spirits. A knock hammered the door, frantic, Copper's voice muffled. "Inspector, open up!" Thorne hauled Tim's upright by the collar, binding his wrists with a curtain cord ripped from its rod, the fabric musty with disuse. He unlocked the door, 2 bobbies tumbling in, truncheons drawn. "Take this slab to the cells, slow roast him till he names names." As they dragged Tim's out, his laughter echoed down the stairs, a guttural promise of unfinished business. Mira sagged, colour returning faintly to her cheeks, but her eyes held shadows. Thorne knelt, retrieving the locket from the drawer. Silver chain snapped, engraved initials flickering in the light. E.T. his own from the daughter he'd lost to the streets years back, pawned in desperation, now circling back like a curse. "Why plant it on me?" he murmured, thumb tracing the clasp, palm scar itching under the metal's chill. Mira wiped her mouth. Thorns plucked from her skin, leaving pinpricks of blood. "Liora. She came last night, eyes wild. Said the butcher's secret would bury us all if exposed. Offered coin for silence, but I refused." Tim's followed, her muscle, not Grimshaw's. Thorne nodded, pocketing the locket, its weight a stone in his chest. Liora Voss, flower girl with ink-stained fingers, gambler's thrill masked by piety, motive sharpening. Her stall reeked of overripe pears and hidden pamphlets, debts lifting her family from tenements, but at what butcher's price? Dawn clawed its way over Spitalfields as Thorne stepped into the street, fog parting grudgingly around costermongers' barrows, already rattling to life. The market stirred, cleavers thunking bone anew, Yiddish barters mingling with the low of penned beasts. He made for Liora's flower stall, tucked in the market's crooked alley where brick arches dripped with overnight damp, petals wilting underfoot into a slick mosaic. She arranged posies with mechanical grace, shawl drawn tight against the autumn bite, but her fingers twisted the fringe faster than usual, betraying the tell. "Mornin', Inspector," she said, voice a lilting East End sing-song, vowels broad as the Thames, no biblical bite to it. "Roses for the Ripper's ghost?" Thorne leaned on her trestle, inhaling the cloying sweetness masking offal's undercurrent from the yards beyond. "Tim sings like a canary in custody. Locket, pamphlets, your runner boy. Debts make strange beds, Miss Voss." Her sharp eyes narrowed, ink stains dark on her knuckles as she paused, stem snapping under pressure. "Tim's lies to save his hide. I sell blooms, not flesh, but Gideon Blackthorn." That porter with the clicking eye. Seen him hauling night crates from Grimshaw's yard. Crates too light for beef, too heavy for air. Thorne's scar twitched, Blackthorn's hulking loyalty a wall he'd yet to breach. The porter fed stray scraps, wept over cats, yet crushed bones for the market code. "Red herring or vein to the heart?" he pressed. "Quill lives, points fingers your way. Care to walk to the station?" Liora paled, shawl slipping to reveal a posy pinned crookedly. Thorns mirroring Mira's wounds. Wait. A crate mark, chalked inside Grimshaw's shed. 22 tallies, 1 crossed, and whispers. Burked meat, fresh from the river drifters. Not beasts. The revelation hung, a thread pulling taut, burking, body-snatching echoes from Burke and Hare's day, flesh peddled as veal to desperate tables. No Eldritch packs, just human rot. Thorne straightened, but a shadow fell across the stall. Gideon Blackthorn himself, glass eye clicking as he hefted a crate onto a cart nearby, sweat beading his brow despite the chill. He met Thorne's gaze, unblinking, then turned away, vanishing into the throng. Thorne pursued, weaving through hawkers and barrows, the market's pulse quickening underfoot, slick with runoff. Blackthorn ducked into a shadowed archway leading to the old fruit vaults, relics of the 1682 bazaar, now storage dank with pear rot and forgotten crates. Thorne followed, revolver heavy in his pocket, air turning fetid, congealing blood mingling with coal smog that clung like regret. Blackthorn, crates and tallies. 22 souls accounted. The porter whirled, massive fists balling, but his voice cracked soft. "Feed the mouths, Inspector, or starve 'em. Grimshaw's pact. Mutual aid, debts shared. No more." Pushed to the wall, Blackthorn's resolve crumbled, tears tracking his weathered cheeks as he confessed fragments. Immigrants vanishing into night shifts, meat sourced from Dorset Street's underclass, sold to blind buyers in the fog. But one name stuck: Silas Grimshaw, the lead butcher, orchestrating from his prime stall. Thorne bound him loosely with his own belt, signalling a lurking Bobby, mind whirling. Blackthorn ruled out as killer, too soft-hearted for throats slit, but conduit to the pact. Yet as constables hauled the porter away, a urchin's cry pierced the din. From Liora's stall direction, Thorne bolted back, heart leaden to find her slumped amid scattered posies, a fresh pamphlet clutched in thorn-pricked fingers. Thorne knows too much. Next is the inspector. Unsigned but ink fresh, and beside her, a snapped chain glinting. Another locket, this one engraved with Liora's initials, planted or stolen. The market closed in, Hawker's eyes averted, and Thorne realized the web tightened, not on butchers alone, but on him, the noose drawn by hands unseen in the fog's embrace. Who held the rope? Thorne knelt in the muck of scattered petals, the sharp tang of crushed violets cutting through the market's ever-present reek of offal and coal dust. Liora's chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, her ink-stained fingers still curled around the crumpled pamphlet, its threat scrawled in hasty block letters. Thorne knows too much. Next is the inspector. He pried it free gently, noting the paper's cheap grain, the ink still tacky, smudging his scarred palm. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes like polished jet, wide with feigned confusion or genuine fog of a blow to the head. "Inspector, what devilry!" she murmured, voice a threadbare whisper laced with that faint Yiddish lilt, pushing herself up on elbows smeared with flour sap. He helped her to a splintered crate, scanning the crowd's edges where hawkers pretended to haggle over wilting cabbages, their glances sliding away like oil on water. The snapped chain lay there, locket glinting dully, LV etched in delicate script, a twin to the one he carried, though his held a faded miniature of his daughter Eliza, lost to him these 7 years in a Manchester asylum for the shell-shocked. Planted, or hers by cruel coincidence? "This yours, Miss Voss? Or a gift from the shadows circling us both?" He dangled it before her, watching her lips part, then press thin. She snatched it, tucking it into her bodice with trembling haste, the motion pulling her shawl askew to reveal a fresh bruise, blooming purple along her collarbone. Mine, yes, snatched last night by some docker rat, but the note. "I found it here, same as you. Someone wants you rattled, Inspector, before you pull at Grimshaw's threads." Her gaze darted to the butcher's row, where Silas Grimshaw's prime stall loomed, hooks swaying empty now as early dusk painted the meat rails in bloody hues from dying gaslight. Thorne traced his palm scar absent-mindedly, the old wound itching like a premonition. Liora Voss, flower girl by day, pamphleteer by the flickering wick of midnight candles, her words venom against market lords who squeezed immigrants dry. Motive to stir trouble means with her hidden press, but opportunity. She'd been with him too often, her posies a fragile alibi in this web of vanishing souls. "Up, then. Your stall's no sanctuary tonight." He steadied her arm, feeling the wiry strength beneath her threadbare sleeve, born of hauling crates since girlhood in Warsaw slums, before the pogroms spat her family across the channel. They wove toward her flour barrow, wheels creaking over cobbles slick with slaughter runoff, the air thickening with the low rumble of closing barrows and distant barrel organs wheezing forgotten tunes. Behind them, constables frog-marched Gideon Blackthorn toward the station wagon, his glass eye catching light like a baleful moon, but Thorne dismissed him fully now. The man's confessions painted a cog, not the clockmaker, his tears for stray cats too genuine for a butcher of men. At her stall, Liora rummaged beneath a false bottom in her cart, pulling a bundle of damp pamphlets tied with twine. "My husband's work, God rest him. Reformers' fire calling out the market's rot, debts that chain us, meat prices rigged by Grimshaw's lot." She unfolded one, the ink stark, Spitalfields flesh trade, what hides in the sausages. Thorne's gut twisted. The words echoed Blackthorn's broken admissions of sourced night shifts from Dorset Street doss houses, the underclass vanishing into ledgers as 22 tallies. "Your man knew the pact," he pressed, voice low as a confessional. She nodded, eyes hardening like flint struck for spark. Ezra Quill. Before Mira took his name and his bedsit, he sniffed too close, printed these a fortnight gone. Found floating in the Thames, throat opened neat as a slaughter line. Official word, docker brawl. But we know better. Mira Quill, Ezra's widow, running that Dorset Street flop house with a velvet glove over an iron fist. Her motivations tangled in avenging grief or profiting from the silence. Thorne pocketed a pamphlet sample, the paper's watermark matching the threat notes. Local mill, no leads there. Liora's arc bent before him, from timid vendor to reluctant ally, her gambler's thrill peeking through religious fervor. Yet her bruise whispered of beatings or worse. Her shadow bulked at the stall's edge, Mira Quill herself, her widow's weeds rustling like dry leaves, face pale as buttermilk under a lace veil, eyes sharp as dressmaker's shears. 27 years etched deep by loss, her frame slender but commanding, hands gloved to hide ink burns or bloodstains. Inspector Thorne, Liora. Word travels, Blackthorn singing to the peelers. Her voice carried a cultured clip, softened by East End vowels, betraying academy polish before marriage dragged her down. Thorne straightened, revolver's weight a comfort. He sang fragments. Your husband's pamphlets lighting fires anew, Mrs. Quill. Care to fan the flames? She glanced at Liora, a flicker of something, rivalry, complicity. Then back. Ezra was a fool for truth. I run honest beds now, 30 souls a night in my doss house, no questions on tallies. But Grimshaw's porters press hard for contributions to the mutual aid. Her gloved fingers twisted a lace edge, betraying nerves or rehearsed poise. Thorne leaned in, inhaling her scent of lavender soap clashing with market decay. Contributions that vanish? 22 butchers. 22 tallies. Your house feeds their crates. She recoiled slightly, veil trembling. Accuse if you must, but search my ledgers, clean as a parson's collar. Liora snorted softly, a dark humour glinting. Parsons' collars hide more stains than most, Mira. The widow shot her a venomous look, then melted into the thinning crowd, skirts whispering over puddles reflecting gas flares. Thorne watched her go, noting the sway toward Grimshaw's stall, where the lead butcher loomed amid shuttering hooks, his face a map of pockmarks and perpetual scowl, 50 if a day, arms like hams from wielding cleavers since apprenticeship. Silas Grimshaw, prime suspect orchestrator of the pact, his stall the market's heart, reeking richest of congealed mysteries. Come dawn, we raid his books, Thorne muttered to Liora, but she shook her head, clutching her locket anew. Night first, Dorset Street, his after-hours den. I know the back way. Reluctance gnawed him. The Ripper's ghost lingered there. Dorset Street's warrens, where 5 women bled out in '88. His scars a souvenir from chasing phantoms. Yet the web pulled. They slipped into fog-choked alleys, gas lamps sputtering like confessions half-spoken, the air alive with rat skitters and muffled curses from gin palaces. Liora's hand brushed his sleeve, a fleeting warmth amid chill, stirring ghosts of Eliza's touch. The Doss house squatted at Dorset Street's crook, Mira's domain, peeling plaster, windows blind with soot, door groaning on rusted hinges. Inside, the fug hit like a fist, unwashed bodies on straw pallets, snores mingling with coughs wet as drowning, the stench of chamber pots and yesterday's stew. Mira waited in a cramped office, ledgers stacked like accusations, candle-guttering shadows across her veil. Search, Inspector, prove your theories. Thorne poured pages, fingers smudged black. Names ticked off, immigrants, vagrants, 22 recent relocations to Grimshaw's shifts, payments funneled back as aid. No blood, but the math whispered of burking revived, bodies for quicklime pits or worse, sold as veal to desperate bellies. Liora hovered, whispering, Ezra marked these flesh debts. Then a loose leaf slipped free, hidden ledger, dates matching vanishings, Grimshaw's signature looped like a noose. Mira lunged for it, but Thorne snatched it first. Yours too, widow. Joint venture? Her composure cracked, gloves shedding to reveal scarred knuckles, brawler's marks. Survival, Inspector. East End eats its weak, but not murder. Not us. Lies or half-truths, her arc fracturing from avenger to participant, eyes pleading now. Outside, fog coiled thicker, a Bobby's whistle shrilling distant. Thorne pocketed the leaf, mind piecing. Mira complicit perhaps, but not the throat-slitter, her grief too raw for cold steel. Liora tugged his arm. Grimshaw next, his stall hides vaults. They emerged into night, but a figure detached from walls, hulking, familiar click of glass eye. Blackthorn escaped or bailed? No, another porter muttering, "Inspector." Grimshaw's boy says, "Watch the reformer's widow. She's the knife." Red herring or truth? Thorne whirled toward Mira's door, but it slammed shut, bolted. Then, from the fog's maw, a cleaver's thunk echoed, not metal on wood, but flesh. A scream rent the night, cut short from Grimshaw's direction. Thorne bolted, revolver drawn, Liora at his heels, the market's pulse now a dirge. Who struck first in this butcher's ballet? And whose blood slicked the cobbles now? If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. Thorne's revolver weighed heavy in his grip, the metal cold as a gravedigger's spade against his scarred palm, twitching with the damp that seeped through his coat from the fog's relentless cling. Leora's breaths came sharp behind him, her skirts whispering over slick cobbles strewn with pear cores and butcher's leavings. The market's night pulse now a frantic throb under gas lamps that sputtered like confessions half-spoken. The cleaver's echo lingered in his ears, not the rhythmic chop of trade, but a wet, final severance, pulling him through alleys where shadows pooled thicker than spilled blood, hawkers' abandoned barrows looming like silent witnesses. They burst into Grimshaw's domain, the butcher's row at the market's heart, a vaulted sprawl of iron hooks dangling empty, walls scaled with frost-rimed meat rails that creaked in the wind off Dorset Street. The air hit first, a wall of copper tang and fresh-slit warmth, overpowering the usual rot of offal bins. Grimshaw stood amid the carnage, his apron a butcher's canvas slashed dark, cleaver still raised in one massive fist, knuckles white around the bone handle worn smooth by years of parting flesh from bone. At his feet sprawled a man, not dead yet, chest heaving in ragged pulls, a gash across his thigh bubbling crimson onto the sawdust floor, staining it black under lantern light. "Stay back, Inspector," Grimshaw bellowed, his voice a gravel rumble laced with East End bark, vowels flattened like hammered meat. He was a colossus, shoulders broad as a dray horse, face pocked from old pox scars that pulled his mouth into a perpetual sneer, greying beard flecked with fresh gore. Thorne knew him from market rounds. Silas Grimshaw, 58, lord of 22 stalls since his father hung the first hook in 68, eyes like polished slate that missed nothing in the cut and thrust of trade. But tonight, those eyes darted wild, not to Thorne, but to the wounded man gasping at his boots, a wiry lad, early 20s, face pale as suet, clutching a satchel that spilled papers into the blood pool. Liora skidded to a halt, her ink-stained fingers flying to her mouth, but Thorne pressed forward, barrel steady. "Drop it, Silas. Now, or I'll ventilate that apron proper." The cleaver clanged to the flag, spinning once before lodging blade down in wood. Grimshaw raised empty hands, palms up, glistening. "Self-defense, Governor. This rat comes creeping in the dark, waving accusations. Knife out for my throat. Had to even the odds." The lad groaned, eyes rolling white as Thorne knelt, revolver trained. Up close, the wound wept steady, but not mortal. Thigh artery missed by providence or design. Papers from the satchel caught Thorne's eye. Scribbled manifests, dates scrawled in hasty pencil, columns of weights and payments mirroring Miraquill's hidden ledger. Flesh debts, one line read, circled thrice with Grimshaw's looping sigil beside. Thorne's palm itched fiercer, the old ripper scar pulling tight as memory. A blade's kiss in 88 fog, unsolved echoes that never slept. He snatched a sheet, folding it into his coat without flourish. "Who's the boy?" Liora asked. Voice threaded with that gambler's edge she hid under piety, kneeling to press her shawl to the gash. The lad's gaze fixed on her, lips moving soundless before words bubbled out. "Ezra. Ezra sent me. Said tell you, the widow's pamphlets, they're the key. Grimshaw's feeding the pit, not just scraps." His voice frayed to a wheeze, body slumping as Liora nodded fierce. her sharp eyes flicking to Thorne like shared secrets in a confessional. Grimshaw snorted, wiping his beard on a rag that smelled of lye and iron. "Lies from a footpad. Boy's one of Blackthorn's crew, that one-eyed brute. Gideon owes me for porter debts, sends this pup to settle with Steele. Market's full of grudges, Inspector, you know it." Thorne holstered slow, mind turning like a cold lock. Blackthorn's glass eye had clicked in warning earlier. Mira's door bolting shut, now this. Suspects circling like dogs over a bone heap. 22 butchers, vanishings tallied neat in ledgers, but no bodies yet. Only whispers of quicklime carts rumbling to Thames mudflats at dawn. Burking reborn? Bodies bought cheap from doss houses, diced for the desperate plates of Spitalfields poor. "Bind him," Thorne ordered Liora, jerking chin at the lad. She tore strips from her petticoat, efficient as a field nurse, while Thorne hauled Grimshaw against a meat block, the wood scarred deep from countless strokes. Up close, the butcher stank of sweat-soaked wool and bay rum, breath hot with porter ale. "Talk plain, Silas. Your crew's stalls run hot lately. Prime cuts when mutton's scarce. Prices too low for heaven's grace. And these—" He waved the paper. Grimshaw's sneer deepened, but his eyes slid to the wound at his feet, a flicker of something raw, fear, guilt carved from poverty's knife. "Time's hard, Inspector. Immigrants flooding in, rents like usury from the lords. We stretch what we got, horse, dog, whatever, don't bark back. No law against filling bellies." But his fingers drummed the block, betraying the lie. Thorne traced his own scar absent, feeling the twitch spread to his jaw. Grimshaw's arc bent here, from market king to cornered beast, loyalty cracking under pressure of debts that chained 22 souls to his will. "That ledger ties to Miraquill," Thorne pressed, voice low as a confessor's. "Joint venture." "Bodies from her doss house to your hooks?" Grimshaw barked a laugh, dry as autumn leaves underfoot. "Widow! She'd sooner spit on me than partner. Her husband's pamphlets railed against us butchers, called us demons feeding on the poor. Ezra, the reformer, drowned suspicious-like, they say. She hates my guts." Thorne filed it. Mira's scarred knuckles from brawls, perhaps not just survival, but vengeance aimed wide. The lad stirred, mumbling, "Pits, under the market. Vaults." Leora's head snapped up, her veil slipping to show cropped hair, dark as rook wings. Bobbies arrived then, whistles trailing into the fog, lanterns swinging wild. Thorne waved them over, detailing the lad for the cells, minor cut, self-defense claim pending surgeon's stitch. Grimshaw they cuffed loose, muttering oaths biblical in fury, led away to the station's iron embrace. Liora lingered, clutching the bloodied shawl. "Ezra marked those papers for me, Inspector. He trusted the flower stalls for whispers. If Grimshaw's vaults hold what I fear—" Her voice trailed, religious fervor warring with thrill in her eyes. Debts to family tenements fueling her pamphleteering fire. Thorne nodded, fog coiling around his ankles like living smoke. The market's cacophony muted now to distant cartwheels and a lone cat's yowl. His locket burned against his chest, daughter's face blurred by years of silence, another debt unpaid. Back at his cramped office off Commercial Street, gas jet hissing low, he spread the papers beside Mira's leaf. Dates synced to vanishings, payments routed through Blackthorn's porter logs, Leora's flower receipts dotted with coded tallies. Pieces slotted uneasy. Grimshaw supplier, Mira fence, Blackthorn mover of relocations. But the lad's pits gnawed, Spitalfields underbelly honeycombed with old smugglers' vaults from Fruit Bazaar days. Forgotten since 82 expansions. Dawn crept grey, coal barges lowing on the lee, when a runner pounded his door, sweaty lad from the station. "Inspector Thorne, the boy from Grimshaw's, took fever in the night, raved about wraiths in the vaults before kicking. Dead. No surgeon's stitch could staunch whispers silenced permanent." Thorne's palm throbbed outright, ripper shadows lengthening in his mind. Red herring or silenced witness? He grabbed coat, revolver reloaded, but as he stepped into the street, a shadow peeled from the wall, Gideon Blackthorn, glass eye clicking deliberate, massive frame blocking the way. "Word travels, Inspector," Blackthorn growled, voice thick as porridge, loyalty to market codes etched in his brute stance. He wept no tears now, only held a crumpled note. Ezra's hand, Thorne knew the slant. "Read this. Changes everything." Thorne snatched it, pulse quickening at the scrawl. "Thorne, the flower girl's the throat. Liora knows the ritual's true. Stop her before the 20-second feeds." Blackthorn melted into fog, leaving Thorne staring at the note, Liora's face flashing. Ink fingers, gambler's thrill. Alley or architect? The market vaults called now, pits yawning wide, and footsteps echoed faint behind him in the dawn haze. Who shadowed the shadow? Comment who you suspect. Can you solve it first? Thorne's boots splashed through shallow puddles that mirrored the gas lamp's sickly yellow haze, each step echoing off the crooked walls of Spitalfields' underbelly. The note from Ezra crumpled in his fist. Liora's name burned into the paper like a brand. The flower girl's the throat. Dawn's light clawed weakly at the fog, but down here in the old smuggler's vaults, beneath the market's fruit bazaar foundations laid in 1682, it barely filtered through iron gratings overhead. The air thickened with the rot of forgotten crates, brine from long-abandoned pickle vats, and something sharper, metallic, like fresh-spilled copper. His scarred palm itched fiercely now, twitching as if the Ripper's blade still hovered, reminding him how shadows lied and truths hid in plain sight. He paused at a rusted hatch half buried in the alley's muck, the one Ezra's ravings had named the pits. Footsteps trailed him still, deliberate, unhurried, a predator matching his rhythm. Thorne spun, revolver half-drawn, but the fog swallowed the sound, leaving only the drip of condensation from bulging timbers. No one. Just the market waking above, distant thuds of cleavers on bone, hawkers' hoarse calls in Yiddish twisting through the grates like smoke. He forced the hatch with his shoulder, hinges screeching protest, and dropped into the vault's chill embrace. Cobwebs draped his fedora like veils, and the lantern he sparked cast jittery pools of light on walls, slick with lime wash and older stains, dark blooms that might have been mold or worse. Deeper in, the tunnel branched, air growing fouler, laced with the tang of lye soap and charred meat. Thorne traced his palm scar absently, the locket chain cool against sweat-damp collar. Daughter's eyes stared back from memory, accusatory in their innocence, another vault he'd failed to seal. Ezra's words gnawed, rituals true. Not wraiths, no. Thorne trusted reason over nursery whispers, but men playing at gods with desperate trades. Burking gangs had tunneled these veins a generation back, peddling cadavers to surgeons' tables. Now, 22 butchers hawking flesh beyond mutton. The pamphlets, the payments, the vanishings, all synced to full moons and market fairs, when outsiders swelled the crowds. A scuffle ahead snapped him alert. He doused the lantern, breath shallow, ears straining past his pulse. Fabric rasped against stone, then a muffled curse, feminine, edged with that flower girl's clipped vowels. Liora. Thorne crept forward, revolver steady, the vault's confines pressing like a coffin lid. Light flickered from a side chamber. Her lantern hung on a hook, illuminating stacks of burlap sacks stamped with Grimshaw's abattoir mark. She knelt amid them, ink-stained fingers prying one open, her sharp eyes darting as if pursued. Petals clung to her shawl, wilted violets from her stall, but beneath lay no blooms. She withdrew a ledger, pages yellowed, columns of tallies in her own hand, dates, weights, payments routed to a Dorset Street address, Mira Quill's doss house. "Liora Voss," Thorne growled, stepping into the glow, revolver trained on her chest. She froze, ledger tumbling, but her face held no panic, only that gambler's glint, defiant as a street Arab facing the beak. Caught knee-deep in the pits, Ezra named you the throat before fever took him. Care to recite the ritual? She rose slow, hands empty, skirts brushing the sacks that shifted uneasily. Something inside settled with a soft thud. Inspector Thorne, biblical man in a godless hole. Her voice carried that reformer's lilt, vowels broad from tenement Yiddish, but laced now with steel. Ezra was a scared lad, spinning yarns to save his hide. Rituals? Pah! Market men's folly, whispering old village tales to cover greed. She nodded at the ledger. Those are flower tallies coded for debts. My family's drowning in them thanks to Grimshaw's loans at usury rates. Thorne snatched the book, revolver unwavering, his free hand flipping pages under lantern light. Tallies matched Liora's stall receipts, aye, but weights tallied too neat with porter logs, Blackthorn's hand hauling relocations on feast nights. And here a sketch, vault map, marked with Grimshaw's stall as feeder, Mira's doss as outlet. Debts don't shift bodies in the night, nor pay in gold leaf from vanished tinkers. You're the scribe, Voss. Pamphleteer by night, throat by trade, choking secrets for the 22. Her laugh echoed brittle off the stones, but her fingers twisted a petal chain at her neck, knuckles whitening. You see shadows where coin rules, Inspector. Grimshaw supplies the meat, odd cuts from his back sheds, aye, but rabbit and dog when mutton runs short. East End hungers. Blackthorn moves it quiet, Mira fences the coin through her lodgers. Me? I tally, warn the reformers. That pamphlet you found? Mine, crying foul on their pacts. But it's burking reborn, not devils. Corpses from the Lear, fished by night, sold to teaching hospitals. No wraiths, just poverty's knife. Thorne's gut twisted, logic slotted pieces, yet Ezra's note branded her liar. Burking fit, bodies for science, market as cover, vanishings blamed on Ripper ghosts. But the gold leaf? The leaf in Mira's hand, Eldritch chants, locals swore, red herring or deeper cut? He holstered slow, palm-throbbing approval. Prove it. Show me the sheds. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the sacks, then nodded. Follow, but mind your step. These pits hold more than ledgers. They wove deeper, her lantern swaying shadows like pendulums, sacks lining walls now, faint moans or wind, seeping through burlap. Thorne's boot nudged one. It yielded soft, warm even in the damp. His breath caught. Alive? No. Fever dreams. Liora glanced back, thrill sparking in her gaze, devout cross glinting at her throat. Contradiction incarnate. Saint scribbling sins. They emerged at Grimshaw's back shed via a ladder, market bustle crashing over them like surf. Butchers hacked haunches under awnings, heavy with frost-rimed pears, blood gutters steaming in the chill. Silas Grimshaw loomed at his block, cleaver mid-swing, face a poverty map of scars and stubble. Thorne, Voss, trouble brewing. His voice rumbled low, porter thick, eyes flat as his glassed eels. Liora shoved the ledger at him. Tell him, Silas, the truth before Blackthorn buries it. Grimshaw wiped blade on apron, congealing crimson flaking off. Truth's a butcher's cut, lean or fat depending the buyer. We take the drowned, the fever-dead from doss houses. Mira sends word. Blackthorn hauls to vaults. Voss tallies sales to Doc's men. 22 of us sharing risk. No more than meat to the starving, no less to the scalpel. He paused, cleaver thunking block. But the boy, Ezra saw too much. One sack breathed, a liven, smuggled Jew from the pogroms, bound for America. We meant to free him later, gold leaf payment up front. Fever took him first, poor sod. Thorne's world tilted, palm searing as pieces locked, not ritual flesh but human cargo, illegals hidden in meat runs, fenced through Mira's warrens. Liora's pamphlets warned to expose, not partake. Yet her thrill betrayed complicity. Blackthorn's note from Ezra, loyalty feigned, silencing a leak. And the leaf? Chance? Old law to scare off peelers, Grimshaw grunted. Village tales from my Da's Suffolk days. Keeps the lads faithful. Relief washed Thorne cold. Reason triumphed, no shadows whispering rhymes. But as Liora met his eye, something flickered there. Gambler's hunger unsatisfied. He turned to climb back, but a hand gripped his ankle. Gideon Blackthorn, surging from the ladder pit, glass eye clicking fury. Not so fast, Inspector. Ezra's note was mine. Bait. The throat's not her. His massive paw crushed Thorne's revolver wrist, vaults yawning below. Liora spun, shock cracking her poise, and Grimshaw's cleaver rose gleaming. Thorne dangled, fog tendrils rising like fingers, as Blackthorn's whisper rasped hot. Mira's the vein, and you're next to vanish. The drop called hungry, Blackthorn's grip iron, and Liora's cry split the air, but whose side called her blade? Thorne's fingers clawed at the damp stone edge. nails scraping moss-slick brick as Blackthorn's meaty fist clamped harder around his wrist. The vaults below exhaled a fetid breath. Rotting pears mingled with the sharp tang of blood long dried, swirling up in the fog like bait for the drop. Pain lanced through his left palm, the old ripper scar awakening with a fiery twitch, memories of that night flooding back unbidden. The slash, the scream, the shadow that nursery rhymed in his ear even now. He twisted, boot heel grinding into Blackthorn's shoulder, but the porter only grunted, glass eye glinting under the lantern's sway like a cold moon. Leora's cry cut sharp, her ink-stained hands flying to her mouth, eyes wide in the vault's gloom. "Gideon, no, he's the law." But her voice cracked, that gambler's thrill flickering beneath the plea, as if weighing the odds of a bigger pot. Grimshaw loomed behind, cleaver paused mid-air, its edge catching the light in a hungry gleam. The butcher's stubbled jaw worked silently, apron crusted with the day's leavings, deciding between old codes and the noose. "You think it's her?" Blackthorn snarled, breath hot with porter's ale and onion sweat, hauling Thorne half upward only to let him slip an inch. "Mira Quill? She's the widow's spinning webs, sending fever dead to our slabs while preaching reform from her doss house pulpit." Ezra poked too deep, found her pamphlets laced with names, buyers from Harley Street paying gold for fresh specimens. "I wrote that note to draw you in, Thorne, and make you chase ghosts. But the boy's throat? That was her man, silencing loose tongues before they reached you." Thorne's revolver lay kicked aside, spinning into shadow, but his free hand plunged into his coat, fumbling the locket. His daughter's face, tiny and blurred by years of polish. It steadied him, a spark against the unraveling. With a surge, he drove his knee up, connecting with Blackthorn's jaw. Bone cracked dully. The porter's grip slackened just enough. Thorne rolled over the lip, tumbling into Grimshaw's legs, the butcher staggering back with a curse. Cleaver clanged on stone, and Thorne scrambled up, snatching his gun as Liora lunged forward, not at him but at Blackthorn, her small knife from the flower stall flashing. "Traitor's the word for you." "Gideon?" she spat, blade nicking his arm, drawing a thin red line that wept into his sleeve. Blackthorn roared, swatting her aside like a fly. She hit the wall with a thud, breath whooshing out, but rolled to her feet, defiant, pamphlets crunching under her boots. Grimshaw retrieved his cleaver, eyes darting between them all, loyalty fracturing like cheap glass. "Enough," the butcher growled, voice thick as congealing fat. "Thorne, we smuggled for survival. Pogrom ghosts paying passage in meat sacks. Mira twisted it, hoarding the gold, selling extras to resurrectionists. Ezra wept to me about it, showed me her ledger. I thought to warn you clean, but Blackthorn, he guards her secrets too close." The vault air thickened, coal smog seeping from above, lamps guttering as if the market itself held its breath. Thorne leveled the revolver, palm throbbing, sweat stinging the scar. Blackthorn straightened, blood trickling from his split lip, glass eye clicking once, a mechanical tick that echoed Thorne's own doubts. "Lies from a slab man," the porter rumbled. "Grimshaw's the one who carved Ezra, quiet-like when the boy demanded his cut. 22 butchers, aye, but only one with Suffolk chance to cover the screams." Liora edged closer to Thorne, her sharp eyes scanning faces, fingers twitching as if tallying invisible debts. "Silas speaks true. I tallied for Mira at first, thought it reform, feeding the poor with the unwanted dead. But the live ones. Ezra freed one, a girl from Odessa, before fever claimed her." Mira raged, called it theft. Gideon's her dog hauling bodies both ways. Her voice dropped, religious fervor clashing with that hidden thrill. "God sees the scales, Inspector. We balance or we fall." Thorne's mind raced, piecing the market's underbelly. Spitalfields stalls as cover for human cargo, Dorset Street doss houses as way stations, Mira's pamphlets masking ledgers of the damned. No Eldritch wraiths, just desperation carved by poverty's knife. Yet one throat slit in the fog, a boy with a whistle, silenced. Blackthorn's note had been bait, but whose hand held the blade? Grimshaw's cleaver hung loose now, and Leora's knife gleamed with purpose. Thorne backed toward the ladder, gun steady. "All of you, hands where I see 'em. We're climbing, and the station waits. Truth's no ritual, it's deduction, cold as this fog. Blackthorn lunged first, massive frame blocking the exit, fists like hams swinging. Thorne fired low, bullet splintering wood near his boot. The porter faltered, glass eye wild. Grimshaw swung his cleaver in a wide arc, not at Thorne but at Blackthorn's knee. Bone crunched, the giant bellowing as he crumpled. Liora darted in, knife-slashing ropes from a meat hook overhead. It swung free, Thorne grabbing it to swing across the pit, landing amid crates of offal that squelched underfoot. The stench hit like a wave, rotted guts, brine, the faint copper of hidden blood, turning his stomach even as adrenaline burned. They piled up the ladder in chaos. Thorne first, then Liora scrambling. Grimshaw shoving Blackthorn's writhing form aside. Gasps echoed in the narrow shaft, fog tendrils coiling around their ankles like reluctant lovers. Above, the market's night pulse throbbed, hawkers' cries fading, costermongers' carts rattling distant over cobbles slick with slaughter runoff. Thorne emerged into the alley's chill, revolver barking once more to scatter shadows, but Blackthorn's roar pursued. "Mira'll bury you all!" Panting, Thorne whirled on Grimshaw as he hauled up. "The ledger. Where's proof Ezra saw Mira's hand?" The butcher wiped sweat from his poverty-map face, breath ragged. "In her doss house, under the reformer's portrait. Hidden drawer marked with a quill. But she's waiting, knows you're close." Liora's face paled, her thrill curdling to fear. She clutched her side where Blackthorn's blow had landed, a bruise blooming purple under her shawl. "We go now, Inspector, before she slips the noose." Thorne nodded, pocketing the locket, the scar's twitch easing for the first time that night. Reason held the line. No rhymes, no shadows, just flesh and greed. They slipped into the fog-choked alleys of Dorset Street, gas lamps casting long Venetian shadows across warrens, where dossers huddled like forgotten souls. The air hummed with immigrant murmurs, Yiddish prayers, Polish laments, overlaid by the distant thunk of cleavers winding down. Mira Quill's place loomed ahead, the blackboard doss house, its sign creaking like a gallows rope, windows glowing faint amber through grimed panes. He pushed the door, bell tinkling mournful. Inside, the heat pressed close, unwashed bodies on straw pallets, stew bubbling in a cauldron with meaty chunks that turned his gut anew. Mira stood at the counter, 27 years etched young by widow's sorrow, her raven hair pinned severe, eyes like polished jet. "Inspector Thorne," she purred, voice smooth as oiled leather, pouring gin into a chipped mug. "Heard you stirred the vaults. Tea." No fear, only that enigmatic poise, hands steady as she slid the mug forward. Liora's breath hitched beside him, Grimshaw hanging back by the door, cleaver traded for a porter's hook. Thorne leaned in, inhaling the gin-sharp air laced with pipe tobacco and despair. "Your web, Mira. Ezra's throat, the ledgers, the smuggling twisted to resurrection trade." Blackthorn sang before he fell. Her laugh tinkled low, fingers tracing the counter's scars. "Gideon, loyal as they come, but the boy. He dreamed too big, wanted the gold for his own flight. I warned him." She turned, reaching under the portrait, a stern reformer with Quill's eyes, and the drawer slid open smooth. No ledger, only a crumpled pamphlet, ink fresh. Warnings of market butchers peddling flesh of the forsaken. Thorne snatched it, words blurring, names, dates, buyers from the anatomy schools, but at the bottom, scrawled fresh, Ezra's hand? No, Liora's ink-stained script. "Thorne comes, burn it." He spun, revolver rising, but Liora was already bolting for the door, Grimshaw blocking her path with a roar. Mira's hand dipped behind the counter, something metallic glinted, and the room exploded in shouts as Thorne lunged, the truth fracturing like glass underfoot. Whose ink betrayed them all? The scuffle spilled into the street, fog swallowing cries, but a new shadow detached from the wall. A figure in a hooded cloak watching silent, hand slipping something into a pocket. A gold leaf, shimmering faint. Thorne's scar burned anew. Who had played them deepest? Thorne's boot skidded on the sawdust-strewn floor as Liora's elbow cracked against his ribs, her ink-stained fingers clawing for the door latch. Grimshaw's hook swung wide, snagging her shawl and yanking her back into the lamplight, where shadows danced like thieves on the walls. Mira's hand cleared the counter's edge, a small derringer glinting in her palm, but Thorne was faster. His scarred palm clamped her wrist, twisting until the gun clattered free, spinning into the stew pot with a hiss of bubbles. Gin sloshed from overturned mugs, mixing with the broth's greasy sheen, and the air thickened with shouts that rattled the thin partitions. "Enough of your games," Thorne growled. Shoving Mira against the scarred oak, her jet eyes flashing defiance even as her breath came ragged. Liora twisted in Grimshaw's grip, her flower girl skirts hiking up to reveal mud-caked boots, not from market stalls, but deeper alleys. The big butcher's glass eye clicked as he blinked, sweat beading on his bulldog jowls. "She runs like a rat from the light, Inspector. Knew it from the pamphlets." Outside, the fog muffled the scuffle's echo, but that hooded shadow had melted away, the gold leaf's gleam now just a memory burning in Thorne's mind. He bound Liora's wrists with a strip torn from a pallet curtain, the rough weave biting into her skin as she spat curses in a Yiddish lilt. Mira straightened her pins, composure cracking only in the tremor of her lower lip. "You'll regret this. Thorne, the market's veins run deeper than your badge." He ignored her, rifling the drawer again. Pamphlets stacked neat, each decrying the butcher's forsaken flesh, but beneath them a slim ledger bound in butcher's twine, pages yellowed, entries meticulous, dates matching the 22 stalls, weights in stone, buyers listed as medicos from St. Bartholomew's and Guy's Hospital. Gold leaves noted in margins, payments tallied against procurements from Dorset Street doss houses. Thorne's scar twitched under the pressure of his grip, the old ripper gash pulsing like a second heart. Ezra Quill's name appeared thrice, crossed out final with ink that matched Liora's stains. "Resurrection men," he muttered, piecing the vault's horrors anew. Not ghosts or rituals, but the oldest trade in the East End, body-snatching reborn. Beggars vanishing from flops, paupers disappeared into stew pots or slabs, their remains portioned and sold as veal or mutton to desperate hawkers, then laundered to anatomy schools hungry for cadavers post-anatomy act. The butchers packed, Grimshaw's lead Gideon's muscle, Mira's dens supplying the raw stock, Liora's pamphlets a smokescreen to scare off rivals or peelers. Grimshaw released Liora with a shove toward the wall, rubbing his hook hand. "Ezra got greedy, Inspector. Wanted double cut for the risks. Found him floating in the Thames, throat opened neat." His voice rumbled like carts over cobbles, loyalty fraying at the edges. Mira laughed sharp, pouring fresh gin despite the chaos, sipping slow. "Gideon tells tales now? The reformer thought he could reform us, print his warnings, but the gold silenced him first." Liora slumped against the straw, eyes darting to the door. "You chase shadows, Thorne. The market eats its own. Always has." Thorne paced the cramped space, the stew's meaty chunks bobbing accusingly, coal smoke seeping under the door to mingle with unwashed sweat. His locket chain dug into his collarbone, a reminder of his daughter's face framed distant in Birmingham, safe from this rot. How many nights had he polished it, whispering biblical pleas for reunion? Now this web ensnared him, personal as the fog in his lungs. He flipped the ledger to a marked page, 22 names but one unchecked. Silas Grimshaw's own stall, shipments doubling others. Your leader's stall overflows while yours scrape by. Who held the cleaver to Ezra's throat, Mira? Who penned the warnings to draw me in? She set the mug down deliberate, fingers lingering on the handle. Silas, loyal Silas, weeping for cats while hauling bodies. Ask your flower girl. She inked the calls, lured the lost ones here. Liora's head snapped up, cheeks flushing under the grime. Lies. I warned them, printed truth to end it. But her voice cracked, eyes flicking to Grimshaw, who shifted heavy, hook tapping his thigh rhythmic. Thorne smelled the lie in the air, sharp as blood under bleach, Liora's thrill for occult whispers masking deeper debts. Her family's tenement teetering. He hauled them out single file into Dorset Street's murk, fog coiling calf-thick around gas lamps that sputtered orange defiance. The bell tinkled farewell as Grimshaw locked the doss house, his click-eyed gaze lingering on Mira too long, a flicker of something unspoken. Spitalfields loomed ahead, shuttered stalls, dripping condensation like wept secrets. the air heavy with offal and overripe pears fermenting in gutters. Thorne marched them to the station wagon rattling empty, a constable's lantern swinging wild. But as they bundled in, a cry pierced the haze. A hawker's barrow overturned, crates splintering, and from the wreckage tumbled not fruit, but bones, picked clean, wrapped in wax paper stamped Grimshaw Prime. Constable Hargrove gaped, lantern casting bones, skeletal white. "Fresh from the vault, sir." Thorne knelt, tracing a femur mark. Saw cuts precise, not animal. Leora's gasp was genuine this time, Mira's poise fracturing as she averted her eyes. Grimshaw grunted low. Spilled cart. Happens in the rush. But Thorne's mind raced, connecting the gold leaf to ledger tallies. Payments from a cloaked benefactor, hooded figure matching the watcher. Not resurrection for schools alone. The bones fed a darker buyer, perhaps foreign anatomists or black market surgeons experimenting beyond law. At the station, the institutional chill bit deeper, morgue lamps buzzing low over steel tables, Captain Hale's office reeking of pipe ash and stale authority. Hale, paunch straining his waistcoat, jabbed a stubby finger. "Thorne, this better tie the 22. Press howling rippers return again." Thorne spread the ledger under gaslight, bones clattering beside. "Body trade, sir. Paupers portioned, sold as meat to stretch profits, excess to medicos." Ezra discovered, silenced. Leora warned, Mira housed the supply, Grimshaw carved. Hale puffed clouds, eyes narrowing. "Proof?" Thorne traced his scar absent, doubt flickering. The pamphlet screamed ritual to mass commerce, but the unchecked stall gnawed. Who profited most? He turned to the suspects chained separate, Leora's fingers twisting prayer beads furtive, Mira sipping station tea with widow's grace, Grimshaw stone silent save his eyes click. "The gold leaves," Thorne pressed Grimshaw, "from the benefactor. Who cloaked watches your spills?" The porter's jowls tightened. "Market business. Cats eat scraps too." Hours blurred in questioning, coffee bitter on Thorne's tongue, steam fogging his vision. Leora broke first, whispering of Mira's drawer hiding letters, promises of escape gold, if Thorne faltered. Mira countered smooth, claiming Leora's debts drove her to lure victims. Grimshaw offered nothing but grunts. Dawn crept grey through bars when Hargrove burst in, face ashen, clutching a crumpled note from the evidence cart. "Inspector," from the flower stall. "Leora's hand, but addressed to you." Thorne unfolded it, ink fresh. "The throat was mine. Gold called. Forgive the lamb." Signed not Leora, but Mira's looping cue. His scar burned fierce as he lunged for the cells, but screams erupted from the holding yard, Grimshaw roaring, chains rattling, and through the window the hooded figure returned, derringer raised not at Thorne, but at Mira's cell door, lock splintering in the fog-shrouded dawn. The shot cracked, glass shattering, and Thorne bolted into peril, revolver drawn, the true puppeteer unveiled at last. Thorne's boots pounded the slick cobbles of the holding yard, revolver heavy in his grip, the acrid bite of gunpowder still curling from the shattered cell window like a serpent's tongue. Fog clung low, thick as curdled milk, muting the dawn's feeble light into smears of grey that turned every shadow into a potential ambush. His scar throbbed under the damp chill, palm slick against the walnut stock, as he vaulted a low crate stacked with rusted chains from the market's forgotten corners. Ahead, the hooded figure darted like a rat into the labyrinth of Spitalfields back alleys, derringer glinting once before vanishing into the murk, the same silhouette that had dogged him since Ezra's throat parted in the slaughterhouse gloom. He fired blind, the crack echoing off brick walls crusted with soot and offal stains, bullet whining into the haze without bite. "Halt, you bastard!" Thorne bellowed, voice raw from the night's interrogations, breath fogging his mustache. The figure didn't falter, cloak flapping as it squeezed between two barrows abandoned from the pre-dawn trade, wheels creaking faintly in the breeze, carrying distant cleaver thuds from the market's awakening heart. Thorne's lungs burned, years of pipe smoke and East End grime protesting the sprint, but he pushed harder, dodging a puddle of congealing blood runoff that splashed his trousers with its copper tang. Behind him, shouts erupted from the station, Hale's bellows ordering constables to the yard, chains rattling as Grimshaw strained against his irons, roaring oaths in a gravelly porter's rumble that blended with Liora's frantic cries. Mira's cell door hung splintered, her silhouette framed in the gap, pale face pressed to bars, eyes wide not with fear, but something sharper, calculating. Thorne caught a glimpse over his shoulder, her lips moving silent as if mouthing a prayer or a curse, before the fog swallowed the scene. That note, her looping cue confessing to Ezra's throat, now felt like chum in shark-infested waters, drawing the real predator out. The alley narrowed into Dorset Street's notorious warrens, where doss houses leaned like drunks, their timbers groaning under the weight of too many souls. The air grew fetid, laced with urine-soaked straw, and the faint rot of yesterday's paupers bundled in corners, breaths ragged under threadbare shawls. Thorne holstered his revolver mid-stride to claw past a low beam, fingers brushing wet lime wash that flaked like old skin. The figure stumbled ahead, hood slipping to reveal a shock of greying hair matted with sweat, turning to loose another derringer shot, lead zipping past Thorne's ear, embedding in a doorframe with a meaty thunk. He lunged, tackling the figure into a puddle that soaked them both, cold muck seeping through wool like icy fingers. They rolled, grunting, the derringer skittering into gloom. Thorne pinned an arm, knee grinding into ribs that heaved with laboured wheezes. Who pulls your strings? Grimshaw? The gold leaves? The hood fell fully back and Thorne froze, face inches from Gideon Blackthorn's, the hulking porter's good eye wild with cornered fury, glass one clicking furiously as it stared sightless into the fog. Gideon's massive paw swung up, clubbing Thorne's jaw with knuckles scarred from market brawls, stars exploding in his vision. Thorne reeled but held fast, tasting blood where a tooth loosened, spitting crimson onto Gideon's cheek. You. The scraps for cats. Human leavings, eh? Covering the stench while the 22 carved their profits. Gideon bucked like a stevedore heaving crates, breath reeking of gin and regret, free hand groping for a loose cobble. Market code, Inspector. Lambs to slaughter, same as always. His voice boomed low, vowels flattened by dockside years, but cracked now with something raw, almost pleading. Thorne smashed an elbow into the glass eye's socket, eliciting a howl that scattered rats from the gutters. Constables swarmed then, Hargrove's lanky form first, truncheon raised, hauling Gideon up in irons that clinked like funeral bells. Thorne staggered to his feet, wiping mud from his coat. The dawn light piercing fog to paint the scene in watery gold, Dorset Street stirring, faces peering from windowsills, whispers rippling like wind through tenements. Hale puffed up last, paunch heaving, pipe clenched in teeth yellowed as old ivory. Thorne, report. That the end of it? Not yet, sir. Thorne retrieved the derringer, its barrel warm, and pocketed a crumpled gold leaf fluttering from Gideon's cloak, same embossed sigil from the ledgers, benefactor's mark. Gideon sagged in the constable's grip, jowls quivering, muttering about stray cats mewling in the night. Thorne's mind raced, piecing the scaffold. Pauper bodies funneled through Mira's doss house, portioned in Grimshaw's stalls, Liora's pamphlets shouting ritual to cloak the trade, Ezra sniffing too close, throat slit by Gideon's cleaver hand. But the gold, who minted it? And Mira's note, bait or confession? Back at the station, the air hung heavy with coal stove smoke and fear sweat, cells now crammed triple. Thorne paced the bullpen, fingers tracing his palm scar absent-mindedly, the twitch easing as adrenaline ebbed. Liora huddled on her bunk, ink-stained fingers twisting a rosary of wooden beads, eyes darting to Mira across the corridor. The widow sat composed, sipping reheated tea from a tin mug, steam curling like ghosts around her sharp widow's peak. Grimshaw slumped silent, cleaver-calloused hands folded, but his gaze flicked to Gideon with something like betrayal. Thorne entered Mira's cell first. Tanita creaking on rusty hinges. She looked up slow, lashes heavy. Inspector, the shot, for me? Her voice lilted soft, reformer's polish over East End grit, words measured like a pamphlet's prose. Thorne slapped the note on her lap. Your hand. The throat was mine. Drawing him out or truth? She traced the ink with a nail bitten to quick, sighing deep. Ezra came to me, pamphlets burning. Said the butcher's meat turned his stomach. Paupers, he swore, vanishing from my house. I wrote Liora to warn him off, but gold came after. Promises from the shadows. Gideon's hand, aye, but whose purse? Liora overheard, banging her tin cup. Lies. Her drawer hid the letters, Inspector. Gold tallies, victim names. Mira's laugh tinkled brittle. Debts make strange bedfellows, flower girl. Yours to the bookies, mine to bury my man proper. Thorne silenced them with a glare, turning to Grimshaw's cell. The butcher leader lifted his head, face a map of knife scars, eyes hollow as gutted fish. Porter turned tail, eh? Cat's got to eat. Thorne leaned close, breath mingling. The unchecked stall, yours. Excess meat to medicos, profits split 22 ways. But Gideon's gold leaves. Who's the 23rd? Grimshaw's lips curled sly. Ask the widow. Her reformer's pamphlet started the whispers. Ritual to scare off peelers. We just sold what came. Thorne stepped back, fog from the yard seeping in, carrying market cries. Hawkers barking pairs, cleavers resuming their thunk-thunk rhythm. His locket warmed against his chest, daughter's face blurred in memory, urging reason over rage. The pieces aligned, body trade born of famine bellies, masked in occult fog to thrive, but one thread frayed, the hooded visits to his office, the derringer's aim shifting from threat to execution. Hargrove tugged his sleeve outside, voice hushed. Sir, Gideon's breaking. Says the gold came from a client beyond the market, a medico in Whitechapel, buying whole for experiments. Name's Dr. Elias Crow, Ripper surgeon once. Thorne's scar ignited anew, pulse hammering. Crow, the ghost from 88 files, shadows whispering nursery rhymes in his nightmares. Had the butchers fed a deeper hunger? He stormed the yard again, revolver reloaded, fog lifting to reveal Spitalfields sprawl, stalls shuddering open, blood gutters flowing fresh. But as he signalled a cab toward Whitechapel, a constable sprinted up, face drained white. Inspector, Mira, she's slipped the cell, lock-picked, gone into the market. Thorne whirled, gaze piercing the throng where flower carts bloomed amid meat hooks swaying gentle. There, her silhouette weaving toward the slaughterhouse core, purposeful stride cutting through dawn crowds, and behind her, Gideon's bellow from irons. Stop her, she knows the pact entire. Thorne plunged into the market pulse, heart slamming against ribs, the air alive with fruit rot and cleaver songs, as Mira vanished into the Crimson Heart, where 22 stalls dripped secrets still unresolved. Thorne's boots slapped against the slick cobbles, splashing through shallow rivulets of blood-tinged water that snaked from the slaughter pens. The market throbbed around him like a beast rousing from slumber, hawkers' voices rising in a ragged chorus, Yiddish barters for overripe pears, Cockney shouts haggling over mutton scraps. His coat hem whipped against his calves as he shoved past a cart piled with glistening entrails, the metallic tang invading his nostrils, sharp enough to taste on his tongue. Miraquill's form flickered ahead, her dark skirts blending with the throng, purposeful as a shadow slipping through gaslight haze. He traced the scar on his left palm with his thumb, the old ripper gash pulsing in rhythm with his labored breaths. 22 butchers, their stalls a veil for something fouler, bodies sourced from famine's forgotten corners, peddled to medicos like Crow for dissection gold. But Mira knew the pact's core. Gideon's bellow confirmed it. Why run now when irons waited back at the station? His revolver weighed heavy in his coat pocket, a cold reassurance amid the press of bodies, elbows jabbing, baskets swinging perilously close. She darted left into a narrow alley, flanked by towering meat hooks, swaying from iron beams overhead, their chains creaking like distant gallows. Thorne followed, lungs burning from coal smog that clung to the air, thickening it into a palpable weight. A porter, Gideon's ilk, bull-necked and sweat-sheened, barreled past him, muttering curses under breath, but Thorne shouldered on, eyes locked on her vanishing hem. The alley narrowed, walls weeping condensation mixed with slaughter runoff, the stench evolving from mere blood to something sweeter, almost floral undercut by rot. Mira! His voice cut through the din, clipped and raw, carrying that East End edge honed from Whitechapel nights. She didn't falter, vanishing around a bend where the alley spat into the slaughterhouse yard proper, Spitalfields' crimson heart, where beasts met their end under cleavers' kiss. Thorne burst through, revolver half-drawn, the yard opening before him in a tableau of controlled savagery. Steam rising from scalding vats, hides stretched taut on racks like parchment scrolls, workers in bloodied aprons heaving carcasses onto hooks, with grunts that echoed off brick walls. There she stood, not fleeing now, but poised at the threshold of the main slaughterhouse door, a hulking timber slab scarred from years of abuse. Her chest heaved, raven hair dishevelled, escaping its pins to frame a face pale as moonlight on Thames mud. She turned slowly, eyes meeting his. Those sharp reformer's eyes that had dodged his questions back in the Doss House parlour, scented with cheap lavender to mask the opium haze. "Inspector Thorne." Her voice held steady, laced with Dorset Street grit, vowels flattened by tenement life. "You chase ghosts in the fog, but they've caught up to you proper." He circled her warily, revolver steady now, pointed low but insistent. The yard's clamour dulled here, muffled by the massive door behind her, from which faint drips echoed like a slowing heartbeat. Hargrove pounded up seconds later, truncheon at ready, face flushed from the sprint. "Got the lad sealing the alley, sir. She's cornered." Thorne ignored him, gaze boring into mirror, lock-picked like a burker's ploy. Gideon's yelling you know the lot, the 22's bargain, the medico gold, Crow's experiments. Your husband's pamphlets lit the fuse, didn't they? Warned of flesh trade masked in rituals to scare off peelers. But you stayed silent. Why bolt now? She glanced at the door, fingers twitching at her skirt pocket. Something bulked there, small and hard. A key? Poison vial? His scar throbbed sharper, memories of shadowed figures in his office flickering unbidden, nursery rhymes whispering from the walls. "My husband saw the market's belly first," she said, voice dropping to a thread. "Reformer, preaching temperance in doss houses, but he sniffed the truth in the gutters, bodies from the workhouses, the Irish docks, famine-wasted souls, vanished without ledger mark. The butchers carved 'em discreet, sold cuts to Crow for his ripper knives and scalpels. Gold flowed, 22 shares, Grimshaw divvying fair." Hargrove shifted, boots scraping gravel. Madness, why the occult whispers, flower girls prattling of wraiths. Mira's laugh came brittle, echoing off the vats. "Red herring, lad." Village lore from the old country, Yiddish tales Liora peddles with her blooms. Scared the nosy, kept peelers chasing shadows. Silas started it after the first haul, when bellies growled post-harvest fail. "Flesh awakens the bound," they murmured, kept the trade humming. Thorne's mind raced, piecing the lattice, Gideon's unchecked stall feeding the excess, Leora's pamphlets fanning flames from afar, Grimshaw's sly grin in the yard. But the hooded threats to his office, the derringers near miss, those pointed personal. "And you? Reformer's widow, running a doss house rife with the vanished? Took a cut, didn't you? Lodgers in, never out, means and opportunity." Her eyes hardened, hand dipping into her pocket. "Hubert died for speaking. Poisoned pie from Grimshaw's stall. Accident in the fog. I played along, waited. But Crow's gone too far. Experiments birthing. Not right. He's in there now." She nodded at the door, urgency cracking her facade. The final pact, 23rd share, his. Thorne's locket chain tugged against his collarbone, daughter's faded image a silent prod to caution. Crow, the ripper surgeon ghost, threading through his nightmares since '88. Had the butchers unwittingly armed a madman? He holstered the revolver fractionally, gesturing Hargrove forward. "Open it! Quiet!" The sergeant heaved at the timber slab, hinges groaning protest, releasing a gust of warmer air thick with copper and something acrid formaldehyde, mingled with the market's eternal offal. Inside stretched the slaughterhouse core, vast chamber lit by sputtering gas mantles, casting long shadows across gutting tables slick with residue, walls lined with hooks bearing quartered beasts. At the far end, amid crates stamped with medico seals, stood Dr. Elias Crow, tall, stooped, frock coat stained ochre, dissecting a form shrouded in canvas. Crow looked up, scalpel gleaming. Glass eye, no. Both eyes milky from years in operating theatres. Not the ripper shade Thorne half expected, but real, fleshly, with a tremor in his grip. Inspector. Fashionable timing. Mira lunged past Thorne, skirt tearing on a hook. You twisted it. Bodies for gold, fine, but stitching them into things, awakening nothing but your vanity. Crow chuckled, low and wet. Vanity? Progress. Famine flesh resilient. Sown hybrids. Stronger labourers for the docks. The butchers supplied, I refined. 22 fools thought rituals hid it. I harvested truth. Thorne advanced, revolver out fully now, Hargrove flanking. The air hummed with flies, drawn to the canvas lump. Humanoid contours beneath, limbs mismatched. His stomach knotted, bile rising past the scar's insistent twitch. Ends here. Motive clear, greed birthing monstrosity. But the office threats, your doing to silence leads? Crow set the scalpel down deliberately, wiping hands on his coat. Necessary. You poked too close post Mira's arrest. He stepped aside, revealing the canvas fully. A patchwork torso, beef haunch fused crudely to human torso, sutures weeping fluid. Not wraith, and not curse, just profane ambition. Hargrove retched quietly, turning away. Thorne's vision tunneled, rage coiling like fog. 22 accomplices, one mad puppeteer. Justice's blade hung ready, but Mira whirled suddenly, her pocketed hand flashing, a small derringer, brass glinting under gaslight levelled at Crow's back. "Not yet," she hissed. He confessed nothing of the ledger, the names of the sourced. Workhouse poor Irish fresh off boats. I need it for the pamphlets, to burn the market entire. Thorne froze, revolver swinging toward her. Drop it, Mira. Law's reach, not vengeance. Crow's milky gaze darted between them, a sly calculation blooming. The chamber tensed, cleavers distant through the door resuming their thunk-thunk. Oblivious. Mira's finger whitened on the trigger, her widow's grief twisting into something feral, as Crow edged toward a side bench laden with vials, poisons, explosives. And Thorne realized the pact's final fracture. Ally turned foe, in the heart of the slaughter where truths bled out messy. But then from the shadows beyond the crates, a figure stirred, Silas Grimshaw, cleaver raised high. Eyes wild with betrayal's fire, lunging not at Crow but straight for Mira's unguarded flank. Silas Grimshaw's cleaver arced through the slaughterhouse gloom, its edge catching the gaslight in a wicked gleam as it hurtled toward Mira Quill's exposed side. Thorne's revolver barked first, the shot cracking like a whip in the confined space, splintering a crate inches from Grimshaw's meaty shoulder. The butcher staggered but didn't drop the blade, his face a mask of raw betrayal, veins bulging in his neck like knotted ropes. Blood. Whose? Spattered the stone floor, mixing with the perpetual slick of slaughter runoff. Mira spun at the sound, her derringer discharging wildly into the ceiling, plaster dust raining down in a gritty haze. Crow dove behind his workbench, vials shattering in a symphony of chemical pops and acrid fumes that clawed at Thorne's throat. Hargrove lunged forward, his truncheon swinging low to crack against Grimshaw's knee with a meaty thud. The big man bellowed, a guttural roar that echoed off the rafters, but momentum carried him crashing into Mira. They tumbled together, cleaver clattering free, her body pinned under his bulk as she gasped for air, fingers scrabbling at the derringer lost in the straw. Thorne kicked the cleaver away, boot scraping sparks from the iron, then hauled Grimshaw upright by the collar of his blood-stiffened apron. The man's glass eye, Gideon's, no, Grimshaw's own, fogged with rage, locked on Thorne's scarred palm, twitching now like a live wire. "You," Grimshaw spat, breath reeking of stale gin and coppery fear. "Ruin in what kept us fed. Lambs to slaughter, that's us all." "Save the scripture for the magistrate," Thorne growled, shoving him against a beam where chains dangled like forgotten nooses. Hargrove cuffed Grimshaw's wrists with a snap, the sergeant wheezing from the scuffle, face pale under the grime. Crow emerged slowly, hands raised, his surgeon's precision fracturing into a smirk that didn't reach those milky eyes. Mira struggled to her feet, skirt torn, clutching her side where a shallow gash wept red. Not fatal, but the sight twisted something in Thorne's gut, a reminder of too many widows in these streets. The chamber settled into uneasy quiet, broken only by the distant thunk-thunk of oblivious cleavers from the main hall and the drip-drip of fluids from the canvas-covered horror on the table. Thorne holstered his revolver, but kept his palm pressed to it, scar aching in the damp chill seeping through the walls. Flies buzzed thicker now, drawn to the fresh chaos, their hum a mocking dirge. He circled Crow, eyes tracing the patchwork abomination, human torso stitched to bovine flank, sutures puckered like bad sewing, a faint sheen of unnatural vigor in the mottled flesh. Not wraith awakened, no Eldritch pact, just man's hubris, stitching desperation into abomination. "Talk straight, Doctor," Thorne said, voice low and even, the Cockney edge honed sharp. "No more shadows or rituals. 22 butchers peddling hybrid cuts, famine flesh you called it. Labourers for the docks, stronger, tireless. You refined their slop into this experiment. Motives greed, plain as the smog outside. But the threats, the pamphlets, Mira's husband, your doing." Crow straightened his coat, fingers lingering on a pocket where Thorne glimpsed the edge of a leather ledger. He pulled it free, thumbing pages yellowed with use, names scrawled in meticulous script, workhouse indigents, fresh Irish off the boats, tallied like livestock. Greed? Hardly biblical, Inspector. Progress. Spitalfields starves while the West End feasts on Argentine beef. These hybrids, resilient, efficient. The butchers sourced scraps, convinced it was old law to ease consciences. Grimshaw led them, loyal dog barking at phantoms. He glanced at the chained man who snarled silently. "I provided the science, sown anew." Mira edged forward, eyes blazing, ignoring the blood trickling down her arm. She snatched at the ledger, but Thorne blocked her with an outstretched arm, feeling the tremor in his own hand betray the night's toll. "And you, Mira, reformer's widow, preaching exposure. Your husband's pamphlets, threats to the market. You knew. Fed me leads, played the avenger. But that derringer said different." Her lips parted, breath hitching as she wiped blood on her sleeve, smearing it like war paint. "Henry uncovered it first. Came to me with whispers from Liora Voss, the flower girl, ink on her fingers from copying notes. He confronted Grimshaw at the Doss house, Dorset Street. They silenced him. Blunt force dumped in the Thames like refuse. I wanted the names, yes, to torch the whole rotten bazaar. Justice beyond your law, Thorne. Law that lets butchers thrive on the poor." Grimshaw rattled his chains, spittle flecking his beard. "Liar! Crow knifed the reformer himself after he sniffed the vats we just supplied, kept mouths fed when fruit rotted, and ships brought ghosts instead of grain." Hargrove grunted, binding Mira's wrists gently, almost apologetic. Gideon's eye, stolen in a brawl over scraps. Fits. Porter saw too much, paid with a socket. The sergeant nodded toward Thorne, admiration flickering in his tired eyes. "You pieced it, Gov. No ripper ghost, just men worse than beasts." Thorne traced his palm scar absently, the old wound from Dorset Street's darker nights pulsing with memory. Shadows whispered no nursery rhymes here, just human frailty, poverty twisting into monstrosity. He thought of his daughter then, her locket heavy in his vest pocket, the reconciliation forever postponed by cases like this. One more cost to order's restoration. "Burn the hybrids," he ordered Hargrove, who nodded and fetched a lantern, flames leaping to devour the canvas and its profane secret. Smoke billowed, acrid and cleansing, chasing flies into the rafters. Outside, Spitalfields slumbered under pea-soup fog, gas lamps guttering like weary sentinels along Commercial Street. Thorne marched the prisoners into the chill, Grimshaw and Crow to the Black Maria waiting with constables, Mira separate, her gaze defiant yet hollow. Liora Voss waited at the periphery, flower basket clutched like a shield, her sharp eyes taking in the procession. "Market's curse ends?" she murmured, voice threaded with Yiddish lilt. "Men's curse," Thorne replied, tipping his hat brim low. "Reason unmasks it." Gideon Blackthorn lurked nearby, feeding a stray cat scraps from his heel, glass eye clicking softly as he watched the wagon rumble away toward the station. No words, just a nod. Loyalty bent, not broken. Back in his cramped office at the station, walls papered yellow with ripper clippings, Thorne poured a tin mug of tea gone cold. The steam long fled. Reports stacked high. Arrests of the 22, vats emptied, ledgers seized for trial. Justice achieved, but the East End's veins still throbbed with desperation. He polished the locket, glimpsing her face. His daughter, safe in the suburbs, ignorant of these warrens. A letter tomorrow, perhaps. First light pierced the grimy window, chasing fog from the cobbles. The case closed. Puzzle solved through deduction's cold light. Butchers desperate, surgeon ambitious, widow vengeful. No spectral dread, only the moral rot beneath market clamour. Order restored, at the price of scars renewed. Thorne stepped into the morning bustle, coat collar turned against the wind, ready for the next shadow in Spitalfields' endless sprawl. Subscribe for more cases that test your deduction skills.